Hi, everybody. Welcome to Andy's Licorice Talk. This is our 20th episode, haven't missed a week. And we would like to remind you, if you could, please like Andy's Licorice Talk Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel. So I have to admit, for this episode, I was grasping at straws a little bit. But I did a l'histoire du soldat when I was a student at Juilliard with our mentor, Mark Gould, conducting, and the phenomenal principal trumpeter of the Cleveland Orchestra, Mike Sachs, was a student there, and he was playing as well. And then last year, I did a l'histoire du soldat with our bass clarinetist and our techie guy here, Lorenzo, conducting in Shanghai with our principal trumpet, Esteban, who's now principal of Chicago Symphony. And I thought, well, I've seen all their interviews this year. They've been phenomenal interviews. And I just thought the world needs to hear this, even if we're clarinet geeks. On top of that, a friend of mine's sister is a top tennis player, and I had the opportunity to meet her about 11 months ago. And I asked her 1,000,001 questions as a tennis player, as a tennis fan, I should say. And I just thought this could be a really, really interesting episode to put all these people together. So anyway, welcome, and let's see how it goes. So the first person we need to introduce is our mentor, Mark Gould. Mark, how are you?
Hey.
Mark was a phenomenal trumpet guru. I mean, he's taught so many of the wonderful trumpeters in the universe, and he's been the guy to go to for at least 40 years. And he was the principal of the Metropolitan Opera, and he's been writing some really clever books on music. He has a YouTube channel, and he was a mentor to me and obviously to Mike Sachs. So it's so great to connect with you, Mark. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Great to see you again. Since our last performance was how many years ago? Don't say. Long time.
Only 43 or 35 or something.
35
like that.
years ago. Oh my God.
So, and by the way, we already warned Vanya, our tennis player, that Mark and I used to play tennis way back in the day, in the 80s, I guess, and we've been practicing again. So she's been shaking in her boots, but I think she's going to tell us how she's overcome our threat.
Well, it's just like when someone comes up to you, oh, Andy, you play the clarinet. I played the clarinet in 7th grade. It's sort of that level. It's not the same thing at all, what they do and what we do.
Great. So, Mark, we're just going to put you on hold for a minute, and now we're going to introduce your former student and present superstar of the trumpet, Michael Sachs.
Hey,
Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Mike's. I mean, we go back a long ways. We had a terrific time at Juilliard, and we had a wonderful opportunity about a year and a half ago. The Cleveland Orchestra came to Macau, which is near Hong Kong, and it was there that we reconnected. And I dragged our principal trumpeter Esteban over. He didn't take too much dragging, and we had a great time and introduced them. And of course, Esteban's in Chicago, and Mike's just been doing super interviews, and he's terrific at combining sports psychology and training with brass performance. And I just thought, I mean, every time I listen to his interviews, I can't help myself. I'm taking notes and studying them afterwards. So I mean, he's going to have a lot of pearls, and and he's generally a great guy. So we're really happy he's joining us. Thanks so much, Mike.
Hey, Andy, always a pleasure to see you, and I'll try to live up to that intro.
Won't be any problem.
Yeah.
And finally, we need to reconnect with my good buddy Esteban. Esteban,
Yay!
where are you?
Well, I'm in Spain right now because I had some trouble with my visa situation, so I came to Spain in July to renew my visa. So now with this COVID situation, it's a little bit crazy, but yeah, we will get it. How are you, dear?
Oh, we're great. We're so happy you're here. I did such a good interview with David Cooper, a little bit geeky, but this is fun. We're introducing trumpeters, hopefully, and clarinetists that are interested in music and performance generally. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's great to see you. And I take full credit. I introducced you to Mike, and now I'm going to introduce you to the famous trumpet guru, Mark Gould. So we're just going to move. We have our tennis player coming on in about 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask these really giants of the orchestral trumpet world 5 minutes each. Can you talk about your routine in getting your performance in the best shape, and how you deal with pressure situations, audition stuff? Before you go on, I need to say something I already mentioned to Mark and Mike. I really enjoyed your interview because you basically, Esteban was playing principal trumpet with us last year, and then commuting once in a while to play with Muti in Chicago. And we had a really demanding trumpet season, I would say. And our music director is reasonably demanding too. So, Esteban B plays Shostakovich, Mahler symphonies, doing them perfectly at a high level, knowing, he had to take like a principal audition for, what you call Bud's Throne, Adolf Herset's the legendary trumpeter's Throne. And what hit me was your system was that you broke down a lot of the excerpts to just 1 or 2 note problems, and so he would be able to sort of compact a 15-minute practice. He could get a whole list down to a 15-minute practice session just during a break of a Mahler symphony, just by addressing the 2 or 3 problems in an excerpt, just little reminders, play a little more through this note before the leap or whatever it is. So I thought that kind of advice would be, really helpful. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you talk now.
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here with you, Andy. We had a great time in Hong Kong, and I miss Hong Kong. I really miss you guys, and I love you guys. You are amazing. You were my best buddies for a year in Hong Kong. That was a magnificent year. I have a great life in Chicago now. I mean, I have wonderful colleagues, and I love my new job, but that doesn't mean that I didn't love my last job. So, as you said, the last year for me was a little bit crazy because I was flying a lot, traveling a lot, working with a lot of different conductors, and doing most of them big programs. So, my routine was always the same. I used to do my bending notes in the morning with my long tones, my flexibility, but my warm-up is very easy. It's just 5-10 minutes, and then I think I'm ready to go. So because I think the most important thing is after the warm-up, not the warm-up. So I try to spend not the maximum I try to spend the minimum time with the warm-up, because then is the performing time. So I prepare for that. It's different than a practice session. A practice session is another different question. But for my today is that basically. So what I did when I remember, especially May last year, we had like Mahler second, Mahler 9, Bruckner 7, Corigliano first. I was with Scheherazade, Brahms second on tour with Muti and CSO. So yeah, and then before Mahler 7 and a lot of things last year.
You also had this very competitive audition looming at the same time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It's just that you were executing these very difficult programs, but you also had to prepare. A lot of those people didn't have that difficult. They weren't flying around the universe every month,
Yeah, and also just to remember, it's very difficult. You know it very well, but flying from Hong Kong to US is a really long flight, especially if you go to the central area or the East Coast. So I remember that flight's like my moment to prepare psychologically for that. That means
I'm really interested in that. So let's go right into that. I mean, again, you were performing, touring with very demanding music directors, 2 different orchestras, and this very important, if you will, audition coming up. What did you mentally do to prepare, even if it was on the flight or whatever, for that moment to peak for those 5 minutes?
You know, when you are practicing or when you are preparing something, as you well said, I was just trying to, during that 15 minutes break, I was trying not to play the whole excerpt, but I was trying to find where was my difficult point. So I was just trying to connect that with the whole solo, with the whole excerpt. So the flight moment was my time to prepare psychologically for that. And when you prepare for an audition, like, well, I was principal guest with them for a year. I'm principal in Asia's best orchestra. So that means you need to be in a level. At least you must be prepared for that kind of stress in that level. So when you, and you know it perfectly, when you are in that situation, all bad ideas come to your brain, like, hey, don't miss this note, take care with that, so, and you, to yourself, you are the worst friend sometimes. So my medicine for that was to think exactly the opposite, just to convince myself that, okay, if something goes wrong, why cannot go wrong? It can happen. So just go ahead and play beautiful with music. That's the main purpose. So I was trying to relax myself and thinking in my worst things, and psychologically speaking, not playing, to prepare my way of playing for that. So I was trying to remember all these things, all these bad things during my flights, to later when I was playing, don't think in that, because I was thinking that if this happens, it's going to be great anyway. So because, I mean, just convincing myself to do it in the right way. So, and you know, we used to be in a very high pressure level, and especially if you sit in this other rehearsal chair.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that Mark or Mike or you or Lorenzo, you have pressure. Of course, everybody has, but that chair is especially going to that.
I want to share something with you. As a non trumpeter, when I was a student, and you know, out of Herseth was like the pinnacle, you know, guy. And what I don't know. I mean, probably Mike and Mark will hopefully verify it. I was told that when Herseth, he rarely made mistakes, but when he did, it was very exciting because he made it his mission to play the next phrase better than anyone has ever played it before. So it got to the level that you almost hope he made a mistake so you could hear what genius was going to come out in the next phrase. So it's interesting that, you know, that you have a little bit of the same mentality. We have a lot. We're so interested in all this, but we need to get Vanya on soon.
Sure.
And so we're going to move right on to Mike and ask him for a few minutes what he does. Mike, thanks. So, I mean, not only are you literally now, you know, 30 odd years at the top of the game, but you're also an established teacher in your own right. So, you know, you might not be on the audition trail the way Esteban was recently, but what are you telling students? Well, I mean, you certainly play high pressure, you know, solos and concerts and concertos. But, you know, what do you do, and what do you advise the students when they're auditioning, and how to just make sure, when, you know, 5 minutes of the hardest stuff ever written for trumpet, how do you mentally prepare for that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Andy, I just want to say thanks again for having me on, and to be on with, you know, Esteban, who is just, you know, as fine a person, a player as there's ever been out there anywhere. And, you know, and Gould, who's like my crazy older brother, who I just love. And without a doubt, without his guidance and his support and love over the years, I mean, I've known Mark now for, you know, coming up on 40 years next year. And, yeah, I met him when I was 19. And I have to say, without his guidance and support and help along the way, there's no way I'd be sitting in this chair for the last 32 years like this and having any you know, fraction of the success I've had without his support and help and guidance. So, you know, just a treat to be on, you know, on with them and of course with you and, you know, the L'Histoire connection. Interesting to talk about, you know, warm up, conditioning, routine. everybody's a little bit different. And of course, everybody's, mentally wired a little different. For me personally, I'm very much a creature of habit. And I have two warm-ups that I basically do. Just for the trumpet players, it's a stamp routine. I studied with James Stamp, legendary teacher out in Los Angeles when I grew up in Santa Monica. And went to UCLA, and I studied with Mr. Stamp for the better part of a couple of years. And then another routine that I created that has, Schlossberg, Clark, that kind of stuff.
Mike, do me a favor.
So I'm gonna get specific. Yeah, I'll get specific. So the stamp routine is very much, doing some kind of easy, da dee da doo dee dee ah. Forgive the voice. There's a reason I don't sing. I play the trumpet. Just some easy, traversing very, very small ranges and eventually kind of widening that out. And then doing some scale things, some note bending, some articulation, some different, further lip flexibility, maybe going a little quicker between wider and wider ranges. So it's basically starting in a middle range and kind of widening everything out and going for that evenness of sound, that kind of equilibrium and ease. And first of all, every single note has a slot where it belongs, like the notes on the piano. That I go for that kind of stability and that kind of centering on every single note that I play. And then I try to do that throughout the range of the instrument in a very even equilibrium. So everything is extremely efficient. Throughout the warm-up, obviously the main thing I'm trying to do is get my air and my tone production going. Getting, aligning my sound, getting the ring, the vibrance, the timing of my articulation, really just kind of getting everything kind of aligned and getting everything, on par with each other and working in tandem and cohesive. And really getting my sound and then all these different fundamental elements throughout the warm-up that after 45 minutes, I've covered, the whole spectrum of the fundamental spectrum. So my warm-up that I do, the other warm-up is, some lip and mouthpiece buzzing, which I also do with Stamp, long tones, slow lips, low lip slurs, some articulation, some widening lip flexibility stuff, more scale and arpeggio-oriented stuff. So I'm just kind of, again, I'm widening it out. My stuff, as opposed to Stamp, starts in the middle of the range. My stuff starts maybe a little bit lower, maybe about a fifth lower. But it's the same kind of idea that you build kind of this fundamental base of your sound and then extend that up. So you're stacking everything in the harmonic series on top of something that's properly in place so that you have that evenness top to bottom and you have the control and the ease, and you're constantly, again, working, trying to work less and get more constantly and to press out that ratio as much as possible. So it's very, very easy. And I like to say that I want the trumpet to feel like it's just a natural extension of my voice. Like I'm singing and I happen to just be using the trumpet as a vehicle. And that it feels very natural and it feels like I'm just kind of, everything is very forward oriented into the room. I'm not releasing the sound. I'm always thinking about moving the sound. It's almost like throwing the ball that's, it's not just, so there's always that flow. And, to me, again, everybody's a little different. Technically, I'm probably warmed up. I could probably go and play my job and do whatever I need to do after the first 10 minutes. But everything else it's as much physical as it is mental. In fact, it's probably more mental because it's every day. I like doing the same kind of sequence. I've figured out a sequence early on. I was very lucky to have something where I knew A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G equals success, equals me feeling, like I've got a lot of flexibility, like I can get around the horn very facile, like I've got my strength, like I've got my endurance, I've got my sound, I've got a wide color spectrum, I've got a wide dynamic spectrum. So all those things are woven in that I do the same warm-up, whether I'm playing a Mozart symphony, a Mahler symphony, or I'm playing Brandenburg Second. It doesn't matter. I do the same kind of a thing to get kind of that basic home base of tone production and kind of get my mind aligned to what I need to do. And of course, every day is a little different. So along the way, I've got all these checkpoints that I'm hitting these certain points and aligning them and figuring out what little thing do I have to do that day. Do I need like a little more articulation, a little less, a little quicker air, a little slower air, a little more focus here, a little more quickness there, a little less. So it's just, and you're talking about minutia that along the way, I'm just kind of just framing my whole thing and getting it, so I'm very focused and also very confident, feeling like, I can gather things into place. That said, I never use my warm up as a crutch. It's not a thing where if I don't do my 45 minutes, I'm finished for the day. I mean, for each of those 45-minute warm ups, I've got a 30-minute, a 20-minute, a 10-minute, and what I call my 5-minute microwave, which is, I get stuck in traffic or, it's a snowstorm and it takes me what normally takes 20 minutes takes 2 hours. I mean, there was one rehearsal we had with Pierre Boulez doing Rite of Spring back about 20 years ago. And it was a giant snowstorm. And at the time, I lived in a place where I was like 5 minutes from work. And it literally took me an hour to get to work. And I walked in at 8 minutes of 10 for a 10 o'clock rehearsal to play piccolo trumpet part on Rite of Spring, which is, it's taxing. And, I don't want to be in a position where I think, I didn't do my warm up. I'm screwed. I never want that kind of feeling in my mindset. So I did the microwave, and I can trust the fact that I've conditioned up to this point. So there's that backlog of conditioning that I can fall back on and trust. So a lot of that is what I'm about. It's the way I prepare. I'm very meticulous and thorough about my preparation. I never show up to a rehearsal at 10 o'clock Tuesday morning, the first rehearsal, not completely prepared to play the piece and knowing what I want to do with absolutely every single note in the piece with purpose and intention. And then it's a matter of just listening to what's going on around me, kind of fitting in and assimilating and really having my radar and awareness up to fit in with what I'm feeling around me, plus incorporating the conductor's wishes, which of course is kind of a threading of the needle of, they're going to ask you to do something. You have your purpose and intention. You know where that comfort zone is, where you can thread the needle, where that Venn diagram, there's that overlap of giving them what they want and still being able to do what you need to do to make it happen. So there's always, that kind of thought process that goes into, assessing what I need to do and being able to do it, that, I could do things, the way they need it. But preparation is everything. As far as my mental approach, some little things like, if I'm not there an hour before rehearsal or an hour before a concert, I consider myself late. For everything that I play, I have like words, character, imagery, color in mind. I think it's very important to have in your mind an image of exactly what do I want to sound like? What do I want this to say? What do I want somebody to feel when I play this particular thing? A lot of this I got from Mark. I mean, Mark really got me to think about widening out my color palette and widening out my expression. And, maybe it's from his time in the opera. And, Mark is such an eclectic player. I mean, he can play anything from bebop to Wozzeck. I mean, it's he's so eclectic with it. And I think that really rubbed off. So a lot of it is figuring out what do I want to say? What do I want my voice to be on the instrument? What do I want to say with this? And having all that worked out. And then, like you mentioned, if I have like the hardest thing, I've got some crazy thing I've got to learn or crazy thing I have to play. My whole mindset that I never allow myself, you'll never hear me say something is either hard or difficult. Immediately, if I say it's hard and difficult, I put myself in a negative mental standpoint. I always look at things that are easy, not easy. I look at things that are either, straight ahead and just, no worries, or something that I have to, something that's challenging. I never look at it as difficult or hard. It's always challenging. And out of that challenge is an opportunity both for me to grow as a musician and explore things deeper in order to get that either the technical facility or expressive facility to be able to carry that off. But it's just a different mindset. If you're thinking about something that's challenging, that's an opportunity. You're looking at something that's difficult or hard, that's something that immediately you're putting yourself in a negative mindset. And I never allow that to come into play. And when I coach my students to do auditions, or when I was taking auditions, my whole thing was that every audition is an opportunity. I mean, I walk into the audition, if I royally screw it up, it's not like penalty. Give me your C trumpet, that's your penalty for screwing that up. No, you walk out with everything you walked in with. There's nothing to lose. There's everything to gain, and there's opportunity. And even if you screw stuff up and you don't get the job, it's an opportunity to then assess and evaluate, how can I do better? And I always have that debriefing after rehearsal, after a concert. It's very short. I don't want to belabor it, but I want to figure out if something went right, what did I do so I can do it again, make it repeatable, make it, it goes back to the warm up and the conditioning. It's like, I want to ingrain things properly and I want to reinforce them properly over and over and over again. So the instinctual habit is there that when the moment of truth comes, I instinctively react correctly. So, there's a lot of backstory. It's that whole thing of like the little iceberg at the top of the water and the giant part underneath, that nobody can see. So, I'm very much about that whole thing. And, just the way I think about it, that, a lot goes into aligning all these elements and then, carrying it off. Confidence for me comes from preparation. I know what I want to do. And then I can be in the flow of the moment. And this is something I'm really looking forward to hearing Vanya talk about, because I'm a frustrated athlete. I would have loved to have played baseball. Played a lot of baseball growing up. And in many ways, playing in a symphony orchestra is like a baseball player playing a 162-game season. It's like stuff is going to happen. I mean, you mentioned Herseth, and I heard Herseth play many, many times. And I can tell you right now, I've heard every great brass player, every great musician over the last 40 years, and I've heard every one of them screw something up royally, including Herseth. The difference is that some people will immediately turtle and just, they're off the cliff, they're gone. But guys like Herseth screwed something up, but the next thing he played, he came in like a cannonball with all the purpose you can imagine. And that to me was, a huge learning thing for me. And I'm reading the private chat. These guys are giving me grief because I'm going off too long on this. So I'm gonna stop there because I want to let Mr. Gould, pontificate the way he needs to.
And I was going to hurry everyone up. I see Vanya. She's actually paying attention a little bit to what we're doing. So another 5 minutes and we're right with you, Vanya. Thanks.
All right. Sorry about that.
Mike, that was great. Thank you so much. Mark.
Hey.
So, I mean, everyone needs, besides the fact that Mark was, was a really, really, or is a really, really fine trumpet player. As I said, I mean, early on, I met this man when he was in his 30s. He was the guy to go to. And if you wanted to be a great trumpet player, at my Juilliard graduation, they formed a little brass quintet, and the two trumpeters were his students. One was Mike, and the other was Dave Bilger in the Philadelphia Orchestra. That was the Juilliard, standard of trumpet, and most of it was because of this man here. So he, by the way, he hates compliments. So I'm glad it's my show, so I can put him on the spot here. So we'll give you a few minutes, and we'll get right to Vanya, and then we'll ask her questions and vice versa. So you have a lot to say on this subject. Okay. Not only have to play 6-hour operas and get through that, but you produced, literally the audition kings generation after generation. What advice are you giving to these people?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about my preparation. If I had something hard to play, I would hide under the bed, weep and pray. That was my preparation.
But it worked.
No, it didn't work. This is the thing. I mean, I'm going to get to a few things. Just a little bit. I mean, I took an audition in 1974. Wow. So they were looking for someone who was for co-principal at the Met. They were looking for someone who was the opposite of Mel Broyles, legendary trumpet player. Mm-hmm. He was like, he could have been the trumpet player for Genghis Khan. That was his personality. So they were looking for someone the opposite of that. So it was me, and I had just probably a year and a half before auditioned for Horace Silver's band, the jazz band. Yeah. So this is where I was, and I was playing for Mario Manzini, who was an escape artist, in Sunnyside Gardens. That's what I was doing. But so when I got the audition list for the Met, it was 10 days before the audition. They sent the music out and that was it. So I had no help. all I did was listen to the tunes and form my own opinion about how the music went. And that was what was very attractive about my playing for the opposite of Mel Broyles. So, luckily I got this job. Michael said one thing that I think is essential, and Esteban the same thing. I mean, Michael goes through these whole freaking rituals and the chicken sandwich, and he does all this stuff, and his routine is like, if you interrupt him during the routine, you could get shot. He's always carrying a handgun. Like all Americans, he's strapped up. But Michael said one thing that's very, very important. And I do this with all my students. It's like, okay, if you don't have an opinion about how you want something to go and know how you want it to go, well, there's nothing really to discuss. You can learn something rote, or you could, learn little details. The overall thing has to be your opinion is very clear about what you're playing. And then the preparation, how do you actually do what you think in your head? So, you talk about the Chicago thing, now Esteban is in that seat. God bless him. I give him a little blessing, on Rosh Hashanah, I give him a little blessing. But, Arnold Jacobs had song and wind, and this is true for every instrument. The song is in your head. The wind, even on the clarinet, as pathetic an instrument as that actually is, even on the clarinet, the song comes before how you're going to execute the song, and that happens, and I say this in my book, like most clarinet players, they have no idea who Peanuts Hucko was. We can get into that later, Either do you, Andy?
But no, I do know Peanuts Hucko, man.
Okay, thank you.
You were my mentor, to a certain degree.
So I would say, I would listen to these young fellows who played the trumpet way better than I could ever imagine playing the trumpet. And Michael Sachs, I'll just tell one story, but, I would speak to Michael, during the season from time to time. And he says, oh, man, next week, Bruckner 4. The next week after that, Zarathustra, then Mahler 9. And he would be all excited. I'm thinking, like, how depressing. I mean, to have to do all that hard shit, please. And I took a Valium, and then I go to sleep and I recover, I mean, it was just like sort of that way. For me, I mean, I'm being honest with you. This would be not for me. I never enjoyed the pressure. What I did was, I did it because I would just get into the music and then do the best I can, prepare the best I can. But I didn't play the trumpet good enough not to be scared. Or maybe I was so bad on the trumpet that if I was scared, then I couldn't play at all. So I trust me, I played in an orchestra with this man for 2 years. He wasn't that terrible. Trust me. He's being a little humble here. Great. So we have a patient guest, and this is adding a lot of spice to this. So we're going to introduce Vanya. Vanya, hey, how are you? Thank you so much for being here. So basically, I've never had a niece, and she's never had a younger brother. So she came through about 11 months ago, and I was this annoying younger brother. Okay, even though I'm twice her age, and just I annoyed the heck out of her with 101 questions. Okay, and she was really patient with me, and I just think, it's so fascinating just listening to these guys talk, and some of the conversations we've had already. So many interesting questions form in my head. So anyway, those of you that aren't huge tennis fans, Vanya, she won Wimbledon in 2010 on doubles. The same year she won the U.S. Open in doubles. She's won probably what I'd say about 7. She's beaten at least 7 top 10 players in singles. She's played in the U.S. Open, Arthur Ashe Stadium, 22,000 people watching against the Williams sisters and people like that, millions of people watching. So I just think, it's really fascinating to talk about her situation. Now, a couple of things as a tennis fan.
I mean, this is pure meritocracy. You can't just sign a contract and join a team. I mean, you could be playing, for Olympic gold and a small injury, and you're playing the equivalent of the minor leagues, just trying to eke out a living. She tells me it costs $200,000 almost a year just to break even, just to pay your hotels, a non-expensive coach, all his fees. You have to hit the $200,000 mark before before you're even. And one injury, I've seen her. I mean, I've seen her play at the biggest, for the biggest prizes, and then literally, a few bad months and injury, surgery, and she's playing, these little challenger events. You have to prove yourself every single match. So I'm really fascinated. But before we do anything, can you tell us, because these guys are baseball fans, and I know you love to sing. So which national anthem, which parts of you sang the national anthem at?
I've sang at the Dodgers Stadium and the Mets Stadium.
Great, fantastic. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to embarrass her. She's amazed in my memory. Show us your tattoo.
Yes, not many people remember this, but let's see.
Okay, believe, right? And what do you do with that tattoo? Why did you get it?
Well, I mean, the reason why I got this was actually when I was a kid. Mark was talking about, confidence, and when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of confidence, and I think I remember reading about. I'll have to actually look that up, and I only just thought about that now. I remember reading about another athlete that used to write "Believe" all over and tape it on his racket. It must have been a tennis player. And so I used to then I started writing "Believe" on my hand. So whenever I felt a little bit down or losing a bit of confidence, I would look down, and it was because tennis, and music as well is very instinctual. Little things pick you up very quickly and can also take you down very quickly. So it was a quick reminder of myself, for myself, to believe in myself.
Great. Now, when I started watching tennis way back in the 70s, like the women's champions, they were 5'4", 5'5". The men were 5'11", 6 feet. And, 40 years later, the men, they're 3 or 4 inches taller, which is normal. But it seems like the women's game has become very much, the power element has changed so much since when I first started. And now I did the research from 2000 to 2016, the average height of a Wimbledon women's champion is 5'11" and a half. Okay. Now, I met you live, and I was amazed. You didn't seem that short. Okay. But I've seen you play a few times, the US Open in China before we met. And I always thought you were, tiny, I guess, because of your playing. So she's about 5'5". But let me put it this way. If you actually search, shortest women or smallest women, I mean, she gets like into the all-time list. Like, yeah, I think you're in like the 30 women. So first of all, let's start with this. I don't want to be arrested here for saying something wrong, but does size matter in women's tennis?
Yes. I mean, in sport, size matters. Tennis, in a way, we're a bit lucky because you do see a variety of sizes. There are smaller players that can still make it. But it definitely is a challenge. I would say in the 90s, that's when you saw a spurt of growth, right? A lot of the Americans that came in, the Williams sisters, Capriati, Davenport, they brought in this new wave of power. And obviously with power, size brought power and just physical mass. And then when I came in, I mean, I would say like through my career, I'm 31 now. So when I started, there were still quite a few players. I would say about a third of the players were around my size, between 5'3" and 5'8". And, every subsequent year, girls just get. It also made a difference that technology, like technology of science. Sports science has really changed a lot. So when I grew up, fitness was important, but there wasn't a lot of science behind it, and now there is a lot of science behind it. So just really from a young age, creating much stronger, efficient, faster, explosive players.
So I just want to say, I mean, it's probably like watching these trumpeters. Like if you go to Carnegie Hall and you see the Cleveland Orchestra and Mike's playing, and you say, wow, this guy's really good and this is a really good orchestra, that's great. But when you go back to your youth orchestra and all of a sudden Mike Sachs comes in and he's playing, Petrushka, you're like, wait a minute, this guy is seriously good. So Vanya comes to my tennis club, okay? And she's playing, and now she's like, I'm not watching her at the US Open. And I'm like, yeah, she's pretty good when I say the US Open. Now I'm seeing her like playing next to these players that are beating me or whatever. These people are seriously good. But what I'm trying to say is, I mean, you've always been quick as heck. I mean, that's why I was naming you, Rabbit. But she can get a lot of power through timing. And I mean, it's really amazing because there's never a shot that you hit that's defensive. Every shot in the most awkward angle, you seem to get power, and you're so efficient. So for me, I'm amazed with you specifically, because in order to play a Venus Williams who's literally 8 or 9 inches tall, you're literally 40, 45 pounds bigger than you, and you're still playing with her at that level. The margin for error that you face is tiny. I mean, your concentration's got to really be there. There's almost no room for error for you to compete with people that of that size.
My mom was.
I know. Say hello to her. I know your matches.
Yes. So that, I mean, being smaller in general, I don't naturally have as much power because there's only so much power that I can output being my size. So luckily I do have really good timing. And not all small players have good timing because I would say I have quickness, but I don't have speed. So I have good intuition. So if I was just going out and running, straight 100-meter or 50-meter, and that's not very long, I probably would lose every time. I mean, doing fitness as a kid was really depressing because I would come in last on everything except agility drills, some plyometrics, things in small spaces. So I'm very quick in a small space. So I have good first step and I have good intuition. But in terms of straight speed, it's about finding the strengths that I have and trying to combat the strengths that, and in general, right? Trying to find the strengths that I have and, try to mute the weaknesses that I have and then overcome the strengths and the weaknesses of my opponent. Definitely playing players of a bigger size, the benefit is, they get free points. And that's hard and that's big because you get to the higher levels and 1 point makes the difference of a match. And so I do have to be much more precise and consistent, not just mentally, but not just physically, but mentally as well. I have to be on top of it all the time because I don't get the free points that bigger players do.
Okay, so you have your belief. I know you've seen sports psychologists, everything else. So I remember one of the biggest regrets of my life was my 40th anniversary of going to the US Open. Okay, it was 2014. You had won your first round and you were now going to play Serena Williams in Arthur Ashe Stadium. And your brother says, listen, we're trying to get people in the friends box. I'm like, you mean the friends right here? You're going to sit next to, Serena's parents and everything. You'll be on TV. I'm like, really? But I have a flight tomorrow. And I couldn't change it, right? But now I don't think you had played her at that point. So you're dealing with one of the best resumes of any athlete probably in history, period, full stop. Very powerful person, extremely famous, and an overwhelming favorite. So you're about to go there. Like Mike's talking about, okay, we play an audition. What have you got to lose? I mean, you've got tens of thousands there is no hiding, And so my question is, do you believe that you can win? when you're going in there and people are just like, oh, this is going to be a routine match? You're going in there against this. Do you read your wrist and really believe you're going to win?
So I was listening to Michael, and he said, he was very positive. Like, his outlook is very positive, and even the wording. And I mean, it's true. Like, when you go into psychology, positive psychology, the wording that you use to talk to yourself is very important, and not to use words that are negative, because your brain gets that feedback even though you don't know it. But I would say I'm a little more pragmatic than that when I go into, I mean, I think it's as well also because we deal with loss all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to say, oh gosh, I'm going to win every time I play is like delusional, because I mean, life just hits you, and you lose pretty much every week unless you win every tournament. If you're in a slam and you play 3 events, you might lose 3 times a week. And so, you have to deal with that loss. And so I would say that I always go in I never go in thinking I'm not going to win, or I definitely am going to win, but I'm going to go in saying, I think I can win. And there's a spectrum to that too. I mean, when I go in and played Serena, that first time I got annihilated.
And it's also, I wasn't there. I've never been there when you lost the match. I felt so guilty. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Andy, you came when I played Sarah Irani, and she was number 4 in the world. And, so you were my lucky charm, and you just decided to abandon me at the biggest stage of my career. So that's okay.
But the second time you played her, it was a pretty good match.
Yeah. So the first time I played her, I mean, it's not just about playing her. It was about playing in that stadium. Most players don't get a chance to play in that stadium very often. Most players don't get a chance to practice in that stadium very often. There is a hierarchy, as you mentioned, and there is a hierarchy even at the top stages. The top players get to play on the stadiums. They get to practice there. They get to warm up there. So they, eat, sleep, breathe there, whereas the rest of us don't really get that opportunity. So it is, in a way, it's more challenging for us, not having that experience. And I was always a player and a person that I don't like being in the public eye. I was always a little bit uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's maybe being Asian. I feel like I'm being judged, and with the honor and the Asian culture. So being on that big stage, plus playing Serena, I felt like if I played Serena on court 27, I would have played amazing. I mean, I don't know if I would have won, but I would have been able to showcase myself, because when I would go out on big stages, I was not only fighting my opponent, but I was also fighting my uncomfortableness of being in front of a crowd. So, and every little thing matters. So yeah, that first time I was really, really nervous. I couldn't play at all. I was so nervous. Like, the match went, and then the worst thing that happens as a player is you get bageled. And so I think that first set went like 12 minutes, and I lost 6-0, and I'm like, just get on the board, just go. So I lost 0-1. I mean, still it's a terrible score. And then 2 years later, deja vu, I played her at the second round of US Open again. This time it was a night match. And just having that experience one time of playing her the previous time, I felt much more comfortable, much more confident, just because I still struggle with the big stadiums. But I did feel like I was able to be much more of myself, and I think I lost 3-3. It was a solid score. Again, the challenge was with Serena. It wasn't about her overpowering me, but she was so strong in the first shots, like with her serve or on the return, that, I mean, if she wouldn't hit through me, but she was hitting strong away from me, and there was only so much I could do with that first shot. So she was winning a lot of those first shot points, and if points got past 2 or 3 shots, I mean, I was winning most of them, and I felt more comfortable with that. But yeah, that was the challenge, playing her.
So psychologically, obviously, as you said, even you Google Federer, you Google Serena. I mean, they lose all the time. You know, I mean, and not all the time, but 20 matches in a year, it's possible, you know. So surely doubt creeps into you is sometimes when you're playing at one point in the match. What do you do to battle that?
So I think, again, it was Michael who said that preparation means confidence. So yeah, that's what I've, yes. So my coach would used to say that hard work is confidence, and that to me is like preparation. So the ways that you gain confidence is I'm reading these private chat comments.
Oh, no.
And so the two ways that you can gain confidence, one way that you can control is work, right? You put in the work and the results will come. That was my coach Tariq. Shout out to him. He used to tell me that all the time, and it's true. Hard work pays off. I mean, the right hard work pays off. But once you get into that routine that you know, it will eventually pay off. However, in sport, the confidence does ebb and flow very, very quickly. We get, one loss puts you down. One win doesn't put you up as much as one loss puts you down. Then you get into a few matches of losses, and then you really have no confidence. And then I would just say the other part of it, because winning is confidence as well. So that's one is hard work and one is winning, but you can't control the winning. So I would say for the winning side, it's just, you just got to keep trying, persevering, because sometimes it really sucks. I mean, you're out there and you have no confidence whatsoever. Like if you go out and you take off a year and you come back and your confidence is at 0, that's better than your confidence when you've lost 5 matches, because it's at like negative. Trying, and that's it. Keep trying, because you at that moment your belief is not very high, and it will come though. There's always an opportunity that will come, and then things will turn around.
So like what I'm fascinated about in tennis is this balance. Like Mike, in my view, he's the Nadal of tennis. Like the water bottles have to be just right. His warm up, everything's got to be right. But this is what's interesting to me about tennis. Like I've been to Batalliaries and stuff. In the weekend hacker section, not the real players. And sports psychologists talk about it's very important not like to be in the moment. Whether you lost the point before or won it, you shouldn't celebrate, and you shouldn't. It's one point at a time. And what the guy said is like, everyone's got their routine. Maria Sharapova was a student there. Everyone's got their kind of routine. And they said if you actually time between points, like Federer and Nadal, they're almost like Federer's 22 seconds, Nadal's like 50 seconds. They have their way of just regrouping and say, okay, I don't even know what just happened, and do that. So that's one kind of systematic thing they do. But this is where you guys is completely different than us. Like, you don't know whether the match before you is going to take 5 hours or 1 hour. Okay. And but if Mike doesn't have his chicken sandwich, I mean, it throws him off. Like, you don't even know when to eat sometimes. There's a rain delay. There's like, so the flexibility that you need, and just even in the big picture, I mean, you're going to the Australian Open, last year you made it into 10, 11 days. This year, you lose the first round. Oh, but your next tournament's, in Asia. What are you going to do for the next 10 days? And you got to figure out constantly how you're going to manage that. So how do you balance the spontaneity and the incredible patience and flexibility with also having that routine that makes you feel comfortable, knowing you like to eat this way, you like to get pumped up this way, you like to sleep X amount of hours? How do you balance that?
Yeah. So I lied. There's one. You also get confidence through the routine. And psychologically, it's about, trying to create a routine that is successful, that you can do unconsciously. So when you do face challenges, like when we do face circumstances that are unexpected, which we always do, it's whether it's the ball changing or the time zone or different surfaces, there's many other things. And that you're trying to have do face a lot of uncertainty. So we try to create as much as we can. We try to control our routine. And we are lucky though, because most of us have a team. You guys don't have a team that comes around us that spoils you and or that does everything for you. Because there's some players that are very organized, like Mike, and then there's some players that are not very organized, but they have a team around them that feeds them that food and grabs the water for them and grabs the rackets and usually it's a little bit a mixture of both. But I think you get used to it in terms of the uncertainty. You get used to it. There's only so much variation that can go on. I mean, sometimes it's very, very unusual. Like, you wait, 12 hours for a match or it gets rain delayed. Some things happen less often. But in terms of the variation, we are somewhat used to it. It is within a range that we're usually accustomed to. And then I think like the hardest thing that we face obviously is like playing an opponent, right? The external circumstances is less variable than the opponent themselves. And so if you can face an opponent and with all the challenges that they're presenting, because they're also changing, at the highest level, you're playing and you've got the strategy going in. And if they're smart enough and they're losing, they're going to switch it up. They're going to constantly switch it up. So yeah, I mean, I would say the external circumstances, you get used to it. You get used to being flexible as you can. And then, but I would say facing the opponent itself is the biggest challenge.
Great. You know what? I knew this was going to happen. I could easily do a 5-hour interview with you. So I got to show self-control. I'm not going to continue. I can tell Mike is just like, his mind is working right now. So I want to hear what he's interested in what you're saying and what his questions are like. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Hey, great. First of all, Vanya, this is like bars of gold, like for those people who are listening, including me. I mean, this is just such great stuff. I mean, and
great.
For me, I've always felt that athletics and what we do in the orchestra, and in particular, for me personally, playing the trumpet is a very athletic endeavor, and I feel like there's a lot of common ground in exactly what you're talking about. But first, I have to say, my parents grew up with the Dodgers in Brooklyn, and then moved out to LA in 1960, 2 years after the Dodgers. I grew up living for the Dodgers. So the fact that you did the national anthem at Dodger Stadium, you were like, you were my idol. Anyhow, no, it's very interesting what, just what you were just talking about, kind of this whole idea of taking it one point at a time. And, in a lot of ways, for us, it's not losing necessarily, but you're not going to play perfectly every time. In fact, I can count on maybe one hand, if that, the number of times over 32 years in the Cleveland Orchestra that I've walked away from a concert thinking that's as good as I can do that. I mean, there's always something better you can do in some little things. So how do you get yourself focusing to a place where you're in a big match? Like say you're in the Wimbledon finals. Mm-hmm. And how do you get yourself so that you're not thinking about, okay, what if you had like a game where you just went, 4 points and done?
Yeah.
And, you just were way off or something. How do you get your mindset that you can have amnesia and put the past behind you and then look at just the present and not thinking about the future? Because I think that's what as a musician, I think that's where a lot of players get into problems. Yeah. Is that they're either looking ahead to the next thing or they're thinking about something that just screwed up 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. So I would say that, at least for myself, getting over points that you've lost or bad points. So we're lucky in that, we can screw up we can screw up most of a match and still come back and win. And again, the challenge of having an opponent is there, but at the same time, sometimes you play bad and your opponent plays even worse. And like, yes, great. I that was the win. So one, I think that letting go of points, letting go of bad shots and points and games is easier because, again, there's always a room for coming back until it's the end. So I would say that we probably learned that earlier, and we don't face that challenge as much. Definitely, looking forward is a concern. I would say that people get the most nervous when they're trying to close it out. It's a big match, and they're worried about the winning part, and people then start getting really tight and play not to lose as opposed to playing to win. Kind of backtracking a little bit, you were talking about not playing or not performing your best most of the time. And I would say, and I would refer back to my coach's words, but one thing that I learned is that, and if I use, percentages, I mean, my coach would say, like, you play average about 70% of the time, you play really bad about 20% of the time, and then you play really good 10% of the time. There's no way that you'll ever play a perfect. Would be incredibly difficult. So it's also about accepting, and it's about accepting that you're not going to play your best every time. Most of the time you're going to play average or sometimes below average. But it's about learning, for us, it's about learning how to win when you're not playing the best. And I've heard people say, well, that's what separates the top players. And it's sort of true, that they can win, they can find ways to win when they're not playing their best, when they're playing pretty shitty and, most of the shots aren't working, but they just figure out a way to break through, whether it's just through like some fortitude or they, in the big moments, are able to produce the tennis that they need.
Yeah, I was just going to follow that up with, what do you see as the biggest difference if you can, between somebody who's ranked number 100, who obviously is an incredible player, and somebody who's ranked number 1?
Well, my first answer would be consistency, but I would say that players, in my opinion, that are around 20 to 100 all can beat each other. And then I would say the top 10 is usually a little bit different, whether that's with physicality. Well, usually it's physicality. At the top players that have the physicality and the mental toughness and the mental consistency. So I would say that within the top 100, most everyone can beat anyone else on a given day, but the higher you go, the more consistency you have throughout the year. So our ranking system goes over a year, and it's rolling. So the players that are ranked high aren't the ones that, win one tournament this week. It's the ones that do consistently well throughout the whole year. And then you get to the very top, and they have to then win tournaments consistently. And so that's the top 10, I would say, generally speaking, is a little bit different, because why are they winning tournaments consistently? And that's usually because they have something special.
Yeah. How do you work on your consistency, and how do you work on your efficiency within that?
You mean consistency?
How do you raise your level of consistency from your standpoint? Because you say, the difference is really that consistency. How to get to the point where you've been? How do you get, and how does efficiency come into that?
Well, so I think you got it, but the consistency is not like consistency of putting balls in the court, but consistency of your level.
That's what I'm talking about. Is like, how do you get to that level and keep that consistent level that you've been able to do to be so successful?
Well, that's why my highest ranking was top 50, and I got there twice. But I struggled a lot so I think with each person it's different. For me, it was about motivation. I struggled to have motivation for longer. Like, the longest I had motivation was about 6 months. And unfortunately, again, our ranking system goes a year. So then that meant that I was motivated for 6 months. I probably did well for 6 months. It wasn't, even if I'm motivated, no guarantee I'll still do well. But then the other 6 months I wasn't motivated, and I wasn't happy to be on the court. And again, every little thing matters. So if you're not motivated and you're not happy and you're not training well, and then, it obviously shows on the court. So for me, it was about the mental side. I think for some other people, it could be physical, about being stronger. Some people struggle with injuries, and that's why they're not consistent enough. So for them, it's maybe about doing a lot more rehab, a lot more strengthening. And for others, it could be, some tennis specific things, like if there's one shot that breaks down at a certain moment, it's about working on that. For me, it was my serve, or it could be like a forehand for somebody. So it's about improving that forehand in the big moments to try to get that a little bit more consistent for the matches over time. So I would say, it depends on the player. Sorry, that's not the
no, that's great. What was your pre-match routine like? Did you have one, or was it different depending what you were doing, or what was your pre-match game like?
I wasn't as particular in my routine as you were. I was more flexible, but one of my best friends, Monica Niculescu. So, for example, before a match, it's we warm up 30 minutes before a match, and that time slot actually just evolved because that's all the time that you get. So you usually warm up about 2 to 3 hours before a match, if possible. You get a little bit of food, then there's a routine on the food that you eat, and then the sports drinks that you drink. And so everything is very, very organized. I'm not very organized, but in general, it's quite organized. And then right before the match, I would spend normally about 30 minutes. Like I would check the scores if I'm playing after somebody. If I'm not playing after somebody, then I would go about 30 minutes before a match, and I would warm up. So I do like a 5-10 minute jog. I would do some sprints, to wake up my body. Things like general, very quick physical things to wake up my body. And then I usually would put music on. I'd be alone for at least 10 minutes at the end, because just to focus, to get some space away from people, to decompress away from people, and really get my mind ready for the match. And usually that was with some music and focusing and kind of envisioning what I saw the match to look like, or what I would feel on the court. I would go over my strategy, typically with my coach again. And my coach was actually really cool. Tennis coaches normally focus just on the tennis side, but there's a lot of different jobs that they can take. So he, fortunately or unfortunately for him, fortunately for me and unfortunately for him, took on the mental coach role as well. So, sometimes he would come and talk to me, and we would do like some verbal affirmations as well. So, but we would take, about that 20 to 30 minute period. And my friend, her routine was 2 hours before a match. And that actually sucked because, sometimes matches go 3 sets or they split sets, and then she'd have to go and do her routine again.
Oh my God.
You just did 3 hours of workout. I would be tired. I wouldn't even be able to play doing your warm-up routine. So it's pretty funny. Like at French Open, she would warm up for 3 hours because they split sets, and I'd go like 5-10 minutes and be like, oh, okay, I feel good, let's go. So there's definitely differences in personality.
Yeah, well, it's very similar with us. And by the way, I feel like I have to kind of defend myself just a little bit, because I feel like I've been put a little pigeonholed in the wrong spot. I'm not rigid with what I do. I've just found that there's a few things that I do that put me in comfort zone, that mentally put me in a place where I feel like once I've done that, I'm aligned and I can hit it with a lot of confidence and know that I can trust everything's going to kind of be where it needs to be.
It's a great, the better, I think that I'm slightly unprofessional because of the way that I am. I think that the more professional players, like the higher you go, the more of a very set routine that you have, and it is better. But I am someone that chafes, if there's if there's too much routine. So it is also about finding that balance of, and again, we have a team. So it's a lot easier if your fitness coach comes in and he gives you a band and you're just, blindly doing something and someone like shoves some food in your face. So it is a lot easier in some ways for us.
No, everybody's wired differently. I mean, look, there was a phenomenal trumpet player, Phil Smith, who was the principal in the New York Philharmonic for the better part of, I think, 38 years, who was the standard bearer for his time. And he was, towards the end of his career, he got more into a routine, but for the most part, he would take his horn out of the case, play a couple songs, play for like 5 minutes, and then go. I mean, it's just, everybody's wired differently. So it's almost like it's not good or bad. It's just finding your groove and what you're going to feel most comfortable with is all that really matters.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
No. Well, finish. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
There's definitely a threshold of routine that you do have to have a routine to some extent. That's all I would say. Otherwise, it is unprofessional.
So there's never been a better group of musicians accumulated this moment right now, from 30s, 50s, 70s, top pedagogues, everything. This is your chance. Is there anything you've ever wondered about the music business or executing, in a symphony orchestra or a solo or an audition that this is your chance to ask them right now?
I'm curious about injuries. If you guys get injured or the physical challenges of it, actually not just the physical challenges, because like in tennis, you're we do get injured, but you're physically changed because of the sport, over long periods of time. So I'm just curious about, the physical side of it.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, and this is something that Esteban and my experience and Gould's experience, we're set apart by about 15 years each, almost exactly. And, the physical part, I mean, the lip is like any other muscle in the body. I mean, when we're talking about routine and fundamentals and, there's conditioning, it's the same way as an athlete would. So, there are things with overuse or not being efficient or not doing things properly that you can injure yourself very, very easily. And, so there's a lot that goes into that equation, especially like you talk about efficiency and as an athlete, and the same for us, that, in my opinion, we have to do things in a very athletic sort of an acumen. And then over the course of your career, of course, I started in this job when I was 26. That felt different than when I was 36 or 46 or now 58. It does feel a little different. If anything, over time, it's felt like I would say and I remember Gould telling me this when I first got the job. He said, when you get in about your early mid 30s, all of a sudden you're going to feel like everything kind of comes together. And probably the timing more for a tennis player would probably be like your early 20s, all of a sudden, or mid 20s, a lot of stuff comes, everything comes together and you really feel like you're resonating in the right way. And then over time, it's going to evolve, and then you find ways to be able to kind of fit yourself and continue to evolve, to continue to get better. But also, my warm-up has adapted and evolved a lot over these 32 years. I mean, it's a little different than I did when I was 26. So the needs and the way things go. And I mean, Gould, you can probably talk to this better because, I mean, you've already gone through. Yeah. You're a little more advanced.
Well, no, it's funny. This Lee Thornburg, who played in what was that band?
Tower Power.
Tower Power. So I remember hearing him talk, and this is for me not a statement in sax because they really don't get hurt because they're so consistent. But it's learning to play hurt. Learning to play with some injury. I mean, for me, anytime I had a big performance, my lip would feel like shit. And then I knew I was going to be okay. If I get up in the morning and I felt great, I'm warming up, oh, this is great, I would be terrified because I knew I was headed for the bad place. I mean, but it's true. I mean, that's just with me. But I shouldn't even be on this call. You talk.
Don't be crazy.
No.
What?
Champion, and you guys play. I'm a jazz musician. Hiding under the bed.
No, don't let him fool you. Look. I heard Mark play the ring. I heard him play Electra. I heard him play a lot of stuff. Mark is as fine a musician who happens to play the trumpet as anybody who's walked the planet in the last 100 years. And I don't want to hear anything other than that. I mean, let him BS you all he wants. He'll poo-poo it. I can sit here and say from the other side of things that, it's please.
Esteban, as the young man who's as Mark, you're right there. You're in that sweet spot that Mike and Mark talk about. You're in your 30s, man. You've had a couple of jobs ahead, and now you have this amazing job, and you're sitting in the throne, as you put it. I mean, you have a lot to live up to. Answer Vanya's question. I mean, are you at all worried about? I mean, you've been flying all over the world the last year, every month. I mean, what do you have any problems? Are you ever worried about injuries, or do you ever have problems with?
Well, well, most of the times you wake up in the morning and sometimes you can feel like shit, as those can happen, especially if you are flying. And I mean, that's very tiring, especially because our body is not adapted to fly long distances in very few hours. So that sometimes can happen. But if that happens, I think that's the moment when the cycle, I mean, when your brain starts to think in the way how to solve that, how to approach that situation. So not especially injury, but during this pandemic, especially in April, I had an injury in my finger. So I cut myself cleaning my dishes. So now that's right. So now my finger is not 100% with my third finger. The third valve finger is not 100% right with the movement. So I'm learning how to be efficient again. Slowly.
Man up, Esteban. Man up.
Yeah.
Finger. For God's sakes.
I know. Vanya's listening. Oh, no, he cut his finger.
I know.
I actually, at Wimbledon one year, I was in, you talked, I mean, that's what it happens. It happens in everyday life. At Wimbledon one year, I was opening a dresser, and the dresser fell down, and I put my hand out because it was going to collapse on me, and I cut my palm in the middle of my hand. I mean, it was a pain in the ass because I had to wear this like Michael Jackson glove. And because playing with the grip, I mean, my hand is always moving, so I kept reopening it. Oh man, it was bad. So I do sympathize. Sorry, Mark.
That's different. Your third finger playing the trumpet, you hardly use it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
No, but still, man. I mean,
I'm sure.
I'm trying to learn with the left now.
No. I one time I broke this finger. I broke my middle finger, and for a while I had to do this. So I was playing the trumpet like this when flipping everybody off. So that you have to adapt. You have to you do the best you can.
And I can't move myself, but I was trying to play like this. So
yeah.
with the left.
No. I did the same thing. For a while, for certain pieces, I do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
I just want to ask Vanya two more questions, then we can geek out a little bit over here. So, first question: we're talking about pain. I know for a fact. I mean, you've been getting these stem cell injections. I mean, you're like on crutches when you do that, and you're still Vanya. If you want to catch her, she's going to be playing in Indian Wells in March in California. Miami right afterwards, and I think you end in South Carolina or in the spring, Vanya.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit, but I'm playing Indian Wells, Miami, and Charleston.
In Charleston, okay. So if anyway, you tune in on the TV or go fly because she's a really entertaining player to watch. But so I have an important question that fascinates me. I mean, Roger Federer, he's got more money than God. He's like he's got a resume, a mile long. Serena Williams, same age. They're pushing 40 years old, right? She's married someone who's, a kid, everything. He's like bedridden with surgery. You're getting these injections. What is it? What is it? I saw you in an interview. Every single player under 30 has had major surgery. Okay, so what is it that makes you still want to go through this and put up with this? Even though you only have a few tournaments left, or that makes Roger Federer that play through this pain and agony with nothing left to prove.
Well, I don't want to, so that's why I'm retiring. I had surgery 3 years ago on my ankle, and basically, long story short, never recovered close to the functioning that I had pre-surgery, and it was very hard to deal with. It was like a major blow. It wasn't a slow descent into poor performance, but it was a quick one, and so that was really hard to deal with. And pain itself is obviously debilitating. I think that the top players, when they have surgery, when I see the ones that Roger's going through, they're smaller surgeries. I can't say that it's very difficult to go through them all. We play because we love it. At the end of the day, my coach, there's a fine line between love and hate, but we definitely do love it. And as long as you can play at the highest, I think I would say, as long as you can play at the highest level, at the level that you want to play at, which is for most of us the highest level, and you still enjoy it, and all the difficulties of the life are all the sacrifices that you have to make are still worth it, because there are a lot of sacrifices, the relationships and injury, your body, your health, money sometimes. So as long as it's all still worth it, then you'll keep playing. Serena, she's chasing, I think that's one of her concerns, is she's chasing that, Grand Slam count. Roger, I think Roger just loves it. He's incredible in that he's adapted. He has, for example, got extremely aggressive. He's changed his game to be like, he's always been all quarter, but I don't know if you've seen him do these like returns from half court and then he charges the net. Like, he's learned to adapt to play against the younger players. So I think he's more cerebral and really enjoys like that strategic challenge of how, because for us, it's funny, you guys were saying, oh, you said the word like 30s, and I thought you were going to say, oh, and then it goes downhill from 30s, because that's what I feel. I feel like I started going downhill from like mid 20s, like 25. I think I started just physically, I could tell I was deteriorating. I wasn't recovering and stuff. So I think for him, he enjoys that challenge, and he's still successful. So I think, it'll get to a point where he won't be as successful in adapting anymore, because his body will then be either too much of a handicap, or he just doesn't enjoy it so much. There's other things he wants to do, and then he'll stop. But I think at the core of it, it's because we love the game.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned recovery. This baffles me too, and I think this applies to practicing as a musician too, in a less extreme way maybe. I never get that. They're always talking about, oh my God, they had this really tough match. Can they recover in time for the next one? And as you say, with old age, it gets harder. But you guys are still, you have to maintain fitness. You're actually still practicing to improve. And yet, recovery is like the be all and end all. And we'll talk later on as musicians about this whole motivation thing that you talked about, because I think that's a lot. It isn't just like who practices the hardest. It's who really still wants to be there and do it. But can you explain that balance? I've never understood that. Put him in an ice bath. Hopefully he'll be ready for the next big match. And yet you're supposed to be fit. You're supposed to be improving and drilling. How do you get that crazy balance going?
Well, I think when the recovery you're talking about is the recovery between matches,
yeah.
And all the work should be done prior to tournaments. So when you're there for tournaments, like all the work that you should be as fit as you can be. You can't expect to be still improving there. So I'd say like we do our training blocks and you get better. You have a training block at the end of the year for about 2 months. And that's where you really work hard to try to get better physically and whatever in your game that you're trying to work on. And then throughout the year, when you're at tournaments, I would say that you're mostly stagnating or getting a little bit worse. And then you play a few tournaments, then you take a break, and then that's when you're trying to like you decrease a little bit of performance during tournaments, then you try to get it back up. So throughout the year, just trying to maintain. But the recovery you're talking about, because there's lots of different types of recovery, is about, I mean, we've had a really long match. And again, there is now a lot of science behind the physicality of it. And that's not just about improving strength and speed and whatnot, but also about, this, and I'm not good at science. So it's about like, the recovery side of it too. So, whether it's about taking an ice bath or getting a massage. So a lot of the times after a match, we'll get a flush. We call it a flush. It's a very quick massage, and it's supposed to help. Well, it helps you create circulation. It loosens up your muscles. It removes the lactic acid. So lactic is that, that soreness that you get after working out for a long time. And again, every little thing matters. So, we're talking about that routine, but you're 100% dedicated to optimizing your performance. So you're going to do whatever it takes to get that peak performance. And that includes obviously like, getting enough sleep or not going outside at all. So, I mean, tournaments are really boring. I mean, you play, you warm up, you practice, you play, you eat at the hotel, repeat, because everything is about maximizing performance. And I mean, the modalities of recovery, I won't get into because there's a lot of different modalities, but yes, it is very, very impactful. And I think the reason why people are so surprised about it is because in the past, it's always been about work, 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 but recovery is just a part of work. So it's, there's only so much your body can do, and then it needs to recover. And there's also recovery mentally as well, because we always get burned out, but that's another thing.
No, but that's great. We'll talk about. Listen, I could seriously do this for 6 hours. I could tell Mike's like, what do you mean 6 hours, 6 days? But unfortunately, this is still a music show, and we're at the hour and a half mark. And this has just been unbelievable. One last question that I think applies to everybody here. What would you tell yourself at 18? What would you tell the Vanya King, the 18-year-old Vanya King, or maybe give her advice, like don't worry about this, or you should have worried more about that, or for that matter, young players. I mean, if it isn't that personal, young players, and particularly right now in COVID and the kind of atmosphere that's presenting. So, what advice would you give? The 16-year-old Vanya Kings out there that are working their butts off, and then they don't even know whether these tournaments are happening and if there's ever going to be an audience and all this kind of stuff. What would you do differently? What would you tell your students if you get into coaching?
I mean, the pandemic is tough. I mean, the young ones now, that's the group that I feel really sorry for, because I mean, there's nothing, I don't know what to tell them. I mean, just keep trying, keep training. I mean, it's so hard for them, because especially the ones that are on the cusp or just broken through, that are really talented, they've lost all the motivation that they've gotten, and it's not their fault. And they also, like, financially, it's really hard when you're young. This is what kills careers, and this probably killed multiple careers right now, players that could have made it, and unfortunately, just didn't have enough money now to travel and had to survive this past year. What I would tell my younger 18 self, I mean, there's lots of things, but I would say get a better therapist.
Are you sure you're not a musician?
I mean, like, it's hard because, I mean, tennis is hard. You start as a child, and you have to be an adult as a child, and you have to be very professional, and you sacrifice your childhood, you sacrifice a lot of the relationships and the normalcy of life. And it is very hard no matter what, even as an adult, it's hard, but at least as an adult, we kind of choose. And with tennis, you don't really get that choice. We're so young, you don't get the choice because you have to start when you're 5 or 6 or 7. So, I think focusing on your mental health is really important, not just trying to brush it away. Don't let other people tell you that, your problems aren't real, that your problems don't matter. And, keep trying to find a good therapist that you could talk to.
Wonderful. I think everybody here is I think we were expecting really special experience with you, but I think we're all blown away by how interesting and relevant and everything that it was. So I can't thank you enough. I'll say it again. She agreed to do this at 9 a.m. in Florida, which a lot of people complaining. She's in California. She was doing her techie rehearsal at 5 something in the morning just to keep her word. So, I mean, that's a sign of dedication, sacrifice, all that kind of stuff we need in music and sports. I'm sure on behalf of everyone here and everyone's listening, we can't thank you enough. Thank you so much, Vanya, for joining us. And now feel free to go to sleep.
Yeah. And now, Mark, I mean, you don't have to be bored of me anymore.
No. I mean, I have lots of questions.
Oh, okay.
One more question. So now you're playing mostly doubles, or you did after that. That's much easier on your body, no?
It is.
Yeah. And to me, it's a much more interesting game to watch. It's tactically much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's physically different. It's physically demanding in different ways, but in terms of like with my ankle, because I struggle a lot with, not to get techie about it. So I struggle with dorsiflexion, so pulling my foot up. So basically when you think about squatting down on your legs, I can't get into that position and it hurts my ankle. And I now have actually arthritis in my ankle. So I do have with loading. So explosive, when I put a lot of pressure in that position, I have a lot of pain. So sprinting is a problem for me in singles, especially being small. I mean, after the serve, I mean, I'm running all the time. And in doubles, you're just covering half the court. I do have good intuition. I usually play with players that are bigger than me and stronger, so they have a wingspan that covers more than half the court. So I'm only covering like this much of the court now, so I'm doing less, but in terms of hand-eye coordination, reaction, quickness, like that part is more engaging, and you have to be actually more focused in doubles because the points go so fast. But I find it very interesting because it's more strategic. It's more like a chess match. You're trying to outsmart your opponent, trying to figure out how you guys are playing while outsmarting your opponent. And I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Anyone remember Indian Wells, Miami, and Charleston, right? Is that what you said? Charleston, right? And if you go on YouTube, you can see her playing singles against 5 or 6 of the top 10 players. And by the way, congratulations. I didn't even know, when I first met your brother, he said that Venus Williams always had your number. It was just a terrible matchup. And then I know it was a team tennis match. It wasn't official, but you beat her 2 years ago.
Was it? Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't Venus. It was Daniela Hanchikova, but Venus.
I could have sworn it. Go on YouTube. I'm telling you, it's Venus.
I lost to her, definitely, but I've only played her once. I lost to Hanchikova 7 times in a row. I mean, I wanted to hang myself when I saw her name in my draw.
Thank you so much, Vanya. I mean, this has just been such a special treat. And I hope the musicians out there are relating some of this really important stuff. It's not just about mutes and reeds and whatnot. So thank you so much. And we'll be in touch. And, best of luck with the last few tournaments of your career.
Thanks so much, Andy. Sorry, my internet's not great, but thank you guys. So that was a lot of fun. I'm so glad to see that there's a lot of characters in the music.
Here.
All right. Bye.
See you. Okay. So I think that was just fat. I have a feeling we all could have just gone on another hour and a half, but it's an hour and a half, and we want to talk about Trump and all these kinds of things too.
Well,
so
Andy, if I may, I want to put this in before it gets too late.
Yeah.
We're talking about athletics and music. There's a part of music, the essential part of music, that has nothing at all to do with athletics. It's very, very different. There's not a winner or loser. Yes, if you take an audition, there's winners and losers. But if you go through history, the times in history where there's, in music, I'll just stick with that, particularly where there's been a very fecund time, when there's been a time when there's been the most creativity artistically in music, is the time when people are having a good time, laughing, drinking, doing all kinds of wonderful things to one another. That's when it's the best time all through. And it's like when people are laughing and not preparing like athletes and not being data driven. It's just like, okay, Charlie Parker playing with the saxophone, held together by spoons and rubber bands, playing something that's unbelievable. So the thing I would counsel for young people is, if there's something that you love in music, put most of your energy into that. It's about the music. And don't worry about all this, like Michael and Esteban, they have to do a big concert, under a lot of pressure. That's a different thing. First and foremost, and I did this with Michael Sachs, it's about, okay, what do you really think about the music? Where are you? Or are you just a complete idiot, a note processor? And I'm not interested in those people. And I'm not interested in hearing them, but I hear a lot more of them now than I did in the past.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important. It's athletic, but then again, there's a huge gap. We're talking about art and making music. Yeah. And what I would like to hear is a symphony orchestra where everybody was sort of drunk playing note concert. That would be very interesting.
Lorenzo played in the London Symphony. What was that like, Lorenzo? Were they all drunk? Or I'm just
no. I mean, I was in an orchestra where, when I joined the orchestra, it was 30% hardcore alcoholics, because that was before Inderol, before beta blockers. And there were times when people would play solos that would be absolutely remarkably great. Other times, they would just spit and saliva would come out, but that's another story. But as we're all orchestra players, when someone's taking a big chance, how much you appreciate that. Like someone's really going for something, even if it doesn't work. It's like, yeah, I'm for that. And it doesn't happen as much anymore. I know Michael does it because I've heard his playing over the years grow into that. Michael plays, he takes chances. He goes for it. He actually really, really goes for it. So I want to talk about that. I don't want to overlook that. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt.
No. That's so great. Thanks so much. And it's remarkable that you're saying that about Mike, because he also has that kind of reputation as one of those never miss guys. So I mean, it's incredible that he can take his chances and still has that great consistency. I wanted to say, conversely to what you're saying, and this is why Mike says, look, I leave the stage and I can count on two hands that the times I can say I never did better. Vanya, I mean, you can go on YouTube and they'll say, wow, he lost the first two sets. He played terrible. He won the next three sets. Is that remarkable? He won Wimbledon. But Mike's playing against the music. He's playing against perfection all the time. So it's like you screw up that first movement and you play a great second movement. It feels great to play the second movement, but I think this is what's so hard for musicians when they don't take your attitude.
Perfection is the enemy of art, period. End of the story. It's the enemy of art. I can't go there. I've been to a lot of concerts. Yeah, it's perfect. I don't know why I left the house. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear some psychotic episodes on the stage. someone having a moment. I live for that. That's great. Yeah. Oh, it took a chance. And they failed. Okay, I'm for that. It's people go to concerts to be excited. Michael and I have had this conversation in the not too distant past about that.
No, and Mark is exactly right. I mean, I would agree that his assessment that over my time in the business, I've seen people take less risks and people be less expressive in some ways. But some people, I mean, the only thing I could talk about is my own thing. And my own thing is that my parents weren't musicians. I didn't grow up in a household that like there was that kind of pressure. I chose to be a trumpet player because I loved it. And the more I've played it, the more I love it. And I honestly say at 58, after all this time doing this, I love it more than ever. To me, this is fun. It's playtime. And that's the kind of feeling I want to see people enjoying. When people express themselves, when you're in the music, the only reason I do all my routine stuff is that I can be in the moment in the music and I can let myself go in the moment and I can be expressing myself. I'm not thinking about what valves I need to push down or some technical aspect. I'm thinking about what I want to say and how do I want to express and how I want to have this dialogue with my colleagues. And, Gould talks about, taking risks. And, I like the concept of a calculated risk is the best way for me to describe what I do. I mean, I take risks, but they're not frivolous and foolish risks and unnecessary risks. They're calculated risks, but it's a risk. I'm always trying to do something. I'm always trying to seek, to evolve my playing. I'm not looking at it in a static sort of, this is just what I do here and that's it. It's that over time, I'm constantly searching. I'm trying to be an eternal student. It's the best way for me to describe my mindset. That I'm constantly trying to search for deeper meaning, deeper understanding of what I'm doing so I can express myself that much more fully in the composer's wishes. And to me, that's fun. I mean, that kind of, detective work to figure out stuff and listening and just, it's staying aware. It's staying in the moment. It's not sitting here and playing with my iPhone or reading a book during a rehearsal when I got a tacit moment. It's like listening and watching other players and not just trumpet players. I feel like, a lot of musicians now, and I just, Mark and I have talked about this. I feel like a lot of musicians now are better players than the players in the past. Can play the instrument better. I mean, there are guys that technically play circles around me, I'm sure. But what they say isn't necessarily as profound. The style and the meaning, and also to a certain extent, I've found the ensemble skills, people's awareness level of others around them. And I don't know how much that is related to the way we listened to music 30, 40 years ago versus the way people absorb and listen to music now with so many different choices and so many different avenues. And just kind of grabbing the first thing off of Spotify, whatever comes up, rather than really seeking out something. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things. It's sociologically oriented, philosophically oriented that come into play with this. But really, to me, it comes back to the simple fact of what Gould is saying, that, the idea that you want to see somebody having fun. You want to see people enjoying it. You don't want to see people just like they'd rather be someplace else than there. You want to see people engaged and energized. And to me, that energy radiates off the stage and the audience in the orchestra, it becomes a dialogue almost.
I remember I was playing, when I first got into Met, I was playing something, and I played good when I was younger. I was good. So, but I played something, I thought it was okay. I survived, I was like nervous. And the principal flute player, Jimmy Politis, came up to me and he said, if I could play as good as you, I wouldn't play like you.
Huh.
And that always stuck with me. It's like,
wow.
Oh, okay. Meaning, hello. I mean, I had that conversation with Ricardo Morales. For all you.
He was a guest on the show. He was a guest on the show.
He would play stuff. He's a remarkable player on the clarinet. And he was playing the Forza del Destino, big clarinet solo, blah, blah, blah. And then he was playing for other clarinet players. He played this really soft high, and he would try to follow the conductor. And I said, man, will you get off that shit and play? and stop that nonsense. Clarinet world crap. You know, no one wants to hear this. You're in the goddamn opera. Will you do something? And he didn't hit me. He did not punch me. But you know, so I mean, it's like that. So I passed on the Jimmy Politis's wisdom to Ricardo. It's like, okay, you fancy pants, let's go play. You're that good, let's go do it. Yeah. I don't care how technically great you are. It's of no significance to me.
This is so fantastic. All this stuff, Mike and Mark. I want to hear from Esteban because you know, Mike and Mark, they're talking about having concept and then executing it. Okay, now you've just won that audition, so it's within a year ago. And what you were trying to get an impression there. You know, this wasn't a 6-hour opera. You had 15 minutes, 30 minutes to make an impression on the committee. Were you worried that you're going to crack a note? Were you? What was the impression? If you had to sum it up in one sentence or one word, when you went in there, what did you want them to think when you left 15 minutes later?
Well, the first thing I think is probably I was a little bit worried about cracking a note, not during I was playing, not during that moment. So I learned something, and in fact, I agree with both. I agree with Mark and I agree with Michael with their concept of I mean, everything is very natural coming from them. And I can share both opinions because, yeah, when I was 18 and I won my first job, I was more about Mark experience. So just natural, completely natural. But then when you are growing up, and then you realize that if you want to maintain the standard, you need to think something more. So that's the way that's the part when I feel more closer to Mike right now. But I think that the Mark opinion is great also because you cannot lose your naturality. So you must be always natural, always, and thinking just in the simple thing of music. And of course, I agree that, yeah, athletics and music are not the same. And arts, in fact, we share some things with the sports. Like, for example, when we play a concert under pressure or some things. I mean, but it's about the mental thing. It's not about, of course, the playing. Because I don't think when you play a tennis game, it's the same as a Mahler's Second Symphony, because even if you play tennis with your heart, it's different. So we play music with our heart most of the times, and or we should play always, not most of the times. So that's why I agree with both. And the situation, I was thinking during all this conversation with Vania, which was incredibly great, because I was thinking a lot of concepts during her talking. I was preparing in a simple way, just thinking, as you said before, not in where I had my mistakes, because that's completely wrong. I mean, I said that before. I was just trying to find my not the best parts of my excerpts, but I didn't mean that was a mistake or a fail or something that I was trying to solve. No, I was trying to think in a different way of approaching that solo or that situation. So I was trying to do all my homework before that audition. That's why when I was exactly playing the audition, I was not worried about the mistake I was just worried about the music. I was just thinking and sing and play beautiful, and this is me. So there is no technical things. There is just music, I think as Mike said before, or Mark, song and wind. That's very simple. It's very easy. Just that 2 words for me, they mean enjoy. enjoy yourself. So if you are worried about you playing, when you are performing, I think that's wrong. That's a wrong situation, and you must solve that before. At certain point you need to think about that before. That's why I agree with both. So I was I was working with 18 years old in an orchestra where, well, sometimes if you go to the rehearsal, everything is fine always. But then when you realize 15, 20 years later that, okay, I need to think something more about how this goes to be calm with myself, to feel more comfortable with myself. So my way of preparing the audition was simple in my opinion. Just marking, not into a box, as Vania said, because they need to have the right meal, the right hours, everything. I like to feel myself a little bit more free with that things, and just going exactly where the points I need to do better. So for example, when some people prepares the audition for 5, 6, 7 months, I don't think that's necessarily, because as you said before, we had an incredible hard season last year in Hong Kong. So that was my day-to-day, was like my preparation. So I was just taking my 10, 15 minutes during the break, or half an hour, 1 hour later at the day, to prepare myself mental and physically to that, but not with 8 hours a day like crazy with that training. No, I don't think that's the best way to do it. And of course, just one more time, when you are performing, it's important to think about the music, not about, as Mike said, I'm not thinking how I'm moving my valves or that things. So make it simple.
Yeah, I see Mike shaking his head, nodding his head, right? So this is a question that conventional wisdom is like, you're in audition mode, and these kids have the time to get the metronome and tuner out and run through this 5 times. But you imply very strongly that doing the job is a lot to do. It puts you in a different category. If I understood that right, Mike, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's about consistency, but Esteban is absolutely dead on the money with this. I mean, the whole thing with auditions, I think a lot of people get into, I call it being an audition monkey, where you just like, if you give a chimp a trumpet and just like do stuff over and over and over and over and over again, you play the excerpts, you don't play the music. Right. And the thing is, to me, whenever I'm on an audition committee, when I hear somebody playing the notes on the page versus when I hear somebody playing music, it's a giant difference. When somebody starts playing Petrushka and they're playing the notes versus somebody playing Petrushka, and all of a sudden they take me into the piece at that moment, and I'm feeling in the orchestra them playing Petrushka, and they transport me into that moment, into the context of the music. And there's a stark difference between the two that I think is a big misnomer in auditions. And it's also that, for me, when I was preparing auditions, especially something big like Cleveland Orchestra or for Esteban Chicago, for me, it was much more about being a complete musician. It didn't matter what piece I was playing, whatever. I just was thinking about, I was going to prepare standard orchestra repertoire. I was ready to play any style of anything, but I wanted to play it in an expressive way, that Debussy was Debussy, Mahler was Mahler, Brahms was Brahms, that everything had a very distinct thing. So there is that undercurrent and these layers of all that preparation and all the fundamentals and all that stuff goes into place of like putting it in place. But when it comes to the show, it's all about what Gould said. It's all about letting go and expressing yourself and being in the moment. When you try to control things too much is, for me, when things go wrong. I'm just a quick thing, and it's a little bit of an athletic thing. I'm a big disciple, a guy by the name of John Wooden, who's the UCLA basketball coach from 1948 to 1975. And Coach Wooden was all about, I mean, he always had these incredible, he had the best team for 10 of his last 12 years. He won the NCAA championship. And just, he would like fundamentals, like first practice every year, 2 hours, how to put on your shoes and socks and how to tie your shoes. The most basic thing for us, how you move the air, how you make a sound, the most basic things. So, and then from there, and just stacking everything. And then when it came time for the game, they, ingrained and reinforced these fundamentals and all these aspects over and over and over again. So it becomes the instinct. So in the game, Coach Wooden would just sit back and unleash the players, and knowing that they would react instinctively because they could trust their preparation and they could just be in the flow of the game. And to me, that's the key. If you can be in the flow, when you're in the flow, you're not aware of the crowd. You're not aware of the environment. All you're aware of is the music and the expression you want to infuse to make the music better in that moment. And the same thing with the audition. You're thinking about just, for these 45 seconds, I'm playing Brahms 2. For these 45 seconds, I'm playing Mahler 5. For these, 15 seconds, I'm playing Zarathustra. Whatever it happens to be, you're in that moment, focused. And this is the other thing I hear from Vanya, and I know Gould may laugh and poo-poo it, but I know he was like this, and I see it in Esteban. I haven't seen Esteban play in person yet, but I see it in his eyes. Right? There's a determination and there's a focus to everything. Even when these guys are talking, even when Gould's farting around, there's still a focus and a determination, and there's a purpose to it. It's not just some BS. There's like a purpose to it. You want to say something. Even if you want to say something to be provocative and piss people off, or be angry, or be loving, or anything in between. You have to inhabit those characters. So to me, that's all part of it.
Yeah. I just want to say to all those musicians out there, this is like everyone's concept of auditions, the word on the street convention. Here you have a guy who's right in the middle of his career. He's done it listening on audition panels. I don't know how many times. You have another guy who's just won, one of the biggest jobs, openings recently. And you have a guy who's mentored, dozens of people, if not more, with tremendous success. And they're all saying the same thing in different words, even in different accents even. And this is hugely important. Listen to it. No one's talking about the metronomes and the tuners. No one plays more in tuner in time than these guys, but they're talking about the character. They're saying what's going to separate me from the other hundreds of people, and this is incredibly valuable. So thank you all. Now I want to move into styles. Esteban, I've talked to you before. You grew up in Europe. You've learned in Europe. You worked in Europe. Yet you've said it's a completely different concept, like American trumpet playing from European. And first of all, you've heard of these guys before, I assume, when you were in Mark, and give them a little bit of a shout out. But what was it that attracted you? Why were you listening to Bud Herseth when all the other Spaniards were listening to the people in Europe? What is actually, if you had to put it into words, what is the difference between standard American trumpet playing, which you've mastered, obviously, compared to your colleagues and fellow students and so forth in Europe?
Well, I don't think it's about exactly the American players or the European players. It's more about what they have on their brains. So I think I was closer to that kind of trumpet school, as Gould was a great defender of that school, and Mike is a great teacher today. So, and of course I knew about them before, but I felt engaged with that kind of sonority, with that kind of alive sound, with that kind of words through the bell. Everybody was saying something. I don't want to say that, if you hear Berlin or Concertgebouw or London Symphony, I don't want to say that I mean, please don't misunderstand me, but I felt closer to that kind of playing. I mean, in simple words, I liked much more that playing. So I knew that I needed to be clear with myself. So, and this is something that I used to say always. Everything, you have a lot of things out there, and you can choose, but not everything is okay. I mean, if everything is good, you need to choose something to follow. So there is a way to follow. It's not okay. I like this. I like that. I like this too. So then you like everything, and you don't know who you are. So that's why I always said, I mean, if you take a path, just go and follow that path. So, and for me, it was very clear, being a Spanish guy, hearing American orchestras and learning how the song and wind and all that things were. I mean, how was that technique, or how to approach that, even if I wasn't never taking lessons with American players in America, or so. I was just trying to follow my path. So I decided for myself to follow that way of playing, and I was trying to focus on that as much as I was able to do. And as I mentioned before, I won my first job with 18, which made me feel comfortable in some ways and experiment in first person what other people was doing right or wrong. So I was able to find my own way to this.
You guys are so profound here, but I want to be as very primitive. Does some of it come down to equipment, like let's say European player versus London, a British player versus Bud Herseth? I mean,
no. All that is that's all old news now. The players I hear from Europe, I would say, are as interesting or more interesting than the players coming out of America. The players coming out of America now, it's like almost more data driven. I hear interesting players. I mean, Lorenzo, you're talking about Maurice Murphy in London. I mean, that's as interesting a first trumpet player as there have been. Now you have it used to be back in the 70s in Germany, if there was something hard to play on the trumpet, they'd import someone from France. Now, of course, that's changed the number of great European trumpet players. And it doesn't matter what trumpet they play. I mean, they play that fish horn, that sidewinder fish horn. They sound great on that. It doesn't make any difference. To me, it's like there are more schools of playing in woodwinds because, you're so anal retentive. All the wind players, the oboe and what kind of reed, and, trumpet players are like stupider than that, so they don't go there. And especially in Spain, in Valencia, everybody plays an instrument. So, I mean, and then, because I used to spend some time over there, it's great, amazing playing all over it. So we're exposed to it all instantaneously. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to go down that road, European versus this, no.
Sure.
The next landing will be some Asian trumpet player that sound like Godzilla, they'll come. Start breathing fire through the trumpet, 6'9", 380 pound, behemoth,
Listen, one great thing, and you guys are amazing, but one thing we really like in the show, we like this. We're hoping this is for all time. So we're going to remember some people, in 80 years from now, they're going to be looking at these guys and some of the people you've been talking about, and what they want to know. So we're going to go up to Lorenzo for just a minute. Lorenzo, those of you that don't know, not only is he now with the Hong Kong Philharmonic and a big part of the show, but he played in the London Symphony for 8 years. All those quirky bass clarinet solos and Harry Potter, that's him. Okay. Now, how many years did you play? You were at the very tail end of Maurice Murphy's career. How many years did you play together?
Okay, so to be honest, yes, I stopped playing with the LSO in 2007, and I joined 2009. But there were but there were like 3-4 years until he actually died in 2010 that he would be a guest in the orchestra. But not only that. I mean, in the LSO they have this huge tradition of trumpet playing, which is the Mark, Michael, Esteban, tell me if I say something completely wrong. But they have
That's
this kind of Salvation Army style, which is a very, very vibrato, and it's beautiful. I mean, the way it's very different from the American or from
Phil Smith
South
Salvation Army background.
Phil Smith's father, Derek, was his teacher, and of course, is very involved in the Salvation Army. Yeah, the British brass band tradition. I mean, every town band there's a brass band. So all those kids come up in a brass band tradition. So many of them start out on cornets. So they start out on the cornet. So it's a little different acumen than playing in the LSO. Those guys are all using B-flat trumpets. Whereas here, predominantly most orchestras play C trumpets. My orchestra is actually one of the few that I play C trumpet and the rest of the section plays B-flat most of the time.
Oh.
But I won't get into that minutia right now, but
I did the same in Hong Kong. It was the guy playing the C trumpet, and my section was playing B flat trumpet.
Yeah, they're mostly British in Hong Kong. Yeah.
So that makes sense. But there's a lot of reasons for it. But yeah, that whole British brass band tradition that all those guys came out of, there's a very distinct style. And Phil Smith, if you listen to his style, it is a very in many ways, you hear that undercurrent of that British brass band style from his father.
Great.
Yeah, and the tradition was so strong that basically even the newer trumpet player like Phil Cobb and even Rod Franks, that he was the other first trumpet. I mean, they all were playing with the same style. So for me, I never heard anything different in that section. It was all the time that kind of very strong style, and I love it, to be honest. In that
it's a very vocal style.
It's
a very vocal style of playing, and I love it. And people who come through the brass band, even in America, they always maintain that, and it's a big advantage, I think. I like it very much.
Great. So, Lorenzo, can you say a few words? I mean, he was still playing great right to the end of his life. Is that right? Very consistent and beautiful.
Well, yes. I mean, there is one fact that he died after less than 3 years. He was retired, and he spent all his life in playing in that orchestra. And of course, he was famous because John Williams, the Star Wars themes and all the sound score and. But I have to say he was in shape until last concert he did was probably a few months before he died. I mean, it was.
Did you get a chance
to
talk to him once in a while, or get to know him a little bit? And
well, okay, so this is very interesting in that orchestra, but probably in all the orchestras. But in the LSO, the brass were in the brass, and woodwinds and in the woodwinds, even at the pub, the woodwinds goes to the woodwinds and the trumpet goes to the trumpet. But I had a chance to talk to him a few times, and he was extremely kind. And and also don't forget at the time, I was 24 years old. I couldn't speak English, basically, and so it was not very easy for me to talk to him. But
Lorenzo, I love your photograph. That's like in Harlem, those jazz musicians.
Yeah.
But I have very bad news for you, Mark. That's my living room. He's in my.
I take it back, Lorenzo. I take it back.
No, Mike. But I love that picture too.
Yeah, it's great. So we want to keep on shouting out, especially for dumb woodwind players who do Facebook. We don't know. I want to start with Mark on this. A little while back, all my Facebook was like flooded when Sam Palafian died. Okay, like a tuba player. Okay, so what was why? What would you want people to know about Sam Palafian in 20, 30 years? Can you tell me, as a dumb woodwind player, what do I need to know about him? What's so special about Sam Palafian as a person, as a player, whatever? how would you remember him? What would you want people to know about him?
Sam Palafian. Sam Palafian was a force of nature. He lived to be 70 years old, but he lived 140 years. I don't think the man ever slept. He could play anything, any style, a great teacher, but he was a great musician. So, and then he, at the end, he played with Boston Brass. He joins Boston Brass to go back on the road because he loved being on the road. As a musician, well, we worked a lot together. We played jazz gigs. We made recordings together. But he's always was stellar. And he was a stellar teacher, stellar player. Very unusual, very unique in that. I mean, you'd have to just, listen to Sam play. I mean, I don't know what else to say about him. It's like, well.
No, man, he transcended the tuba.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, he transcended the tuba, and he was just this force. As Mark said, he was like just this force of positivity. I mean, when you talk to Sam and you got on the phone with him, everything was possible. It's like, what are we going to do? What are you up to? Yeah. Yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, man, let's go. I mean, he was always encouraging. And I will say this, that Sam in many ways is the reason that I do what I do. Because when I was 19, I did the Empire Brass Quintet Symposium. Sam was coaching my quintet. Mark is his best friend. They're like brothers. And Mark comes up to visit him. Sam introduces me. The whole time he's like, you guys got to get together, man. You got to get together with Gould. Like, this is, that's your path. And Sam is the one who hooked me up with Gould and set me on this course. And Sam, every time from then on, from age 19 on, was like, man, you got it. You got to do this, man. He was so encouraging and such this presence of positivity in my life. I mean, just this great beacon of positivity and just and also a creative force. I mean, he was a great arranger. He was a great, philosopher of music, as well as just, again, he just transcended the tuba. You were never, I remember I heard the Empire Brass Quintet doing some Ewald quintets and the Buma Sextet. I heard them play that with Armando Gatalla, just reading it. Wow. And it's like, I'd hear something, it'd be like, and I'd realize Sam had done that. And it's like, you didn't realize, all of a sudden you didn't hear him, but all of a sudden the whole group sounded better. Or you'd hear some sound that was like perfect. And you realize it came from a tuba and you're like, how on earth did he do that? I mean, he was this great singer who happened to use the tuba as his vehicle. And it just, and again, like Mark said, he never slept, and he was just this force of energy.
Well, I saw you. I mean, the best thing about Mike, right? He's one of these guys. He doesn't get on social media much, but when he does, it's fantastic. It's very sadly, it's often because someone passed and he has a profound remembrance. But I was reading your stuff. Of course, I had heard of Sam. I didn't know. Maybe I also attended a rehearsal of Empire Brass or something as a kid. I know Mark was very close and mentioned him. And all of a sudden, every brass player had something to say about him. So I started looking him up, and some of his interviews and stuff like that. So I'm now curious from a brass player point of view, and I'm purposely leaving out Esteban. I want to ask the old guys, and it's because it's about Chicago. I remember he was fascinated, it seemed, with he called it Jake and Bud. Our first trumpet of Chicago, of course. Bud Herseth and Arnold Jacobs, the tubist. There was something. He made it sound like there was something really special and magical about that combination, unusual rather. So I want you guys, again, for dumb woodwind players, what was so special about this Jake and Bud combination? Let's start with Mark.
Yeah, well, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, when Sam Palafian played in the orchestra, I'd always look over to him and he looked miserable. It wasn't going fast enough for him. Thank God he didn't get in an orchestra. It would be the wrong place for him. Just limited his abilities playing tuba in an orchestra. I will say this, the whole thing with Jacobs and Herseth, it's all overblown. I'm sick of it. fuck them. Let's go on to something else. That's my feeling about that. That's enough. I've heard enough of this. Jake, Bud. Listen, Esteban, how many years since Bud is gone? He has a shot to actually do that job. God bless him. I give you a little Jewish prayer on the New Year. But this Jake and Bud thing, let's move on, please. Enough. Please. I'm sorry. Okay. I relinquish the floor.
Okay. Right. Mike, you can speak.
All right. I think I can clean this up a little bit. All right. Yeah, that's kind of I'm kind of the comic relief here, and I'll come with the broom after the comedian to sweep the floor. No, Jake and Bud were like, in baseball, it's like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. It's like in any team you need like superstars, and the thing is, in the brass section, the tuba's the lowest voice and the trumpet's the highest voice. The first trumpet's the highest voice. Mm-hmm. And those bookends, if you have those bookends in the right place and on the same page, the rest of the brass section, it becomes a unit. You have, when you're connected from first trumpet, tuba, or tuba to first trumpet, however you want to look at it, both ways, either way. And with Esteban, he's got Gene Pokorny, who is as fine a tuba player as ever been. I have Yasuhito Sugiyama, and Yasu-san is as fine a tuba player as anyone anywhere has ever been. And it's like that partnership is essential for the brass section to work as a cohesive unit, because you need that fundamental. You need somebody to just like, bang, there's the fundamental. There's no BS. That's why the Empire Brass worked so well, because you had Rolf on the top and you had Sam on the bottom. When you got that kind of strong voice and that work together and that have that chemistry and that have that innate sense that they could, after a while, you read each other's minds and you know where each other's going. You go to that same place together, and you have this sense. It's like I always set up where there's like a slight horseshoe where I could see Yasu out of the corner of my eye, so I could see him breathe and he could see me, and just little dink or doink here and there from each other. And it's like everything just goes zoom, and we all come together. And it's, that's what it's about. I think that, it's the same thing with the woodwinds. You need a great contra player, a great bass clarinet player to be the anchors. And then you need a great, principal oboe and flute on the top voices, along with the clarinet and bassoon. So everything kind of funnels this way and everything works in tandem. But without either a great low voice or a great high voice working together with that kind of chemistry, you're not getting a section. You're getting great individuals. And the thing is, to me, the whole thing is a team sport. It's got to have this kind of, you can come at it with these different things, but in the end, it's all got to mesh. It can't be just like this disparate kind of, everybody going different directions.
Yeah, that's true. The tuba player should make friends with the first trumpet and vice versa. I agree with that 100%. Yeah, that's true. And now let's move on from freaking Bud and Jake.
Okay.
It's like,
again, it's like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. They played baseball they played 100 years ago, but guys are still,
Sure.
It is what it is. But at the same time, Gould's point from the standpoint of they're not the only guys who ever strapped it on. Yeah, right. Of course there are other guys. You had Warren Deck and Phil Smith. You had any number of other people. You had Roger Bobo and Tom Stevens in LA. There are many other combinations who were sensational in their own right.
Well, take any orchestra now in the world. I can name 40 where.
Mike Roylance and Tom Rolfs.
That's right.
Carol Jansch and Dave Bilger. You take any of these.
Right. Yeah. So
Chris Martin and Alan Baer. Same thing. You can name any.
I'm going to take Mark's advice and move on. I'm getting scared over here. So I want to keep on remembering people. Again, the second time brass players, all of a sudden my social media completely flooded recently was this trumpeter Ryan, right? And again, Mike does this beautiful tribute. Mark, well, all of you guys said something. So what do I need to know about him? There's this cancer blows thing. What I notice is once in a while, if I wanted to see a great, I love jazz trumpeters. So how many times would I search on someone like Doc Severinsen, and all of a sudden he's doing Cancer Blows? So what was this whole thing about? What do you want people to know about Ryan and everything else? Mike, I want to start with Mike.
Okay, all right. I mean, I'll try to make this quick. I apologize, I get too long-winded.
No, it's all right.
No, I first knew about Ryan. I mean, I grew up on the West Coast in Santa Monica, and Ryan grew up in San Diego. He's younger than me, but I had found out about Ryan a couple years before I got to Cleveland. When he was about 16, I started hearing about this rumor about this blonde kid on the West Coast who was ridiculous, just a great player. And then he came to study with my predecessor, Bernie Edelstein, here in Cleveland. He won the 17 magazine competition. And as part of that came a concerto with the Cleveland Orchestra the year before I got here. And when he was 17, then he came to study at Cleveland Institute of Music. And then I came here, and Ryan didn't leave with Bernie, thankfully, and decided to stay here and study with David Zauder, who was a great longtime second trumpet player here. And, Ryan and I developed a very quick friendship, and really he was very much a younger brother to me, and somebody who was very, very close with Ryan. Ryan's just one of those generation talents. I mean, every generation, there's a guy like an Esteban or a Ryan or a Chris Martin or, those kind of guys that come around that are just so sensational. And I mean, Ryan could play anything, man. Anything. I mean, when I would first start doing studio class at CIM, and the first studio class I did, I told the kids, just come in and play something. I was getting to know him. I'm 26. So Ryan gets up and, of course, plays the third movement of Brandenburg. And they and he puts a G on the end and takes it off. And then he stops and he looks at me like he looks at me as like, what are you going to say about that? And I'm only a few years older than him at that point. And I'm just looking at him like, all right, you want to go there? Okay, But no, man, Ryan again, a lot like Sam. Ryan just had this positive spirit. Ryan was always so much fun and so enthusiastic and so talented, and just everything was so much fun with him. He never gripped. I remember he did this Don Erb trumpet concerto that, it would take me 2 years to learn. Probably learned it in 3 months, got up and played it like he was just, yeah, whatever. Like it was nothing. I mean, it was just very easy for him. And it was fun. And then he was in Canadian brass, and the Cancer Blows thing, he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma cancer about 7 years ago. And this says so much about Ryan that instead of, a lot of guys would have folded their cards and been like, I'm cooked. I got a year. Screw it. Instead, he was like, okay, I'm going to create something where I'm going to bring attention to this, and I'm going to raise money for this to help fight a cure for this for as long as I'm alive. And I'm going to fight this because I want to see my daughter, who at the time was 10 or 11, I want to see my daughter graduate high school. And they told him initially he had maybe a couple of years to live, and he ended up living almost 8 years.
Wow. 8 years further, 7 years further. And, but he sunk all his energy into this Cancer Blows, all about finding a cure. And, for me to show that kind of humanity in that moment of crisis says what an incredible, just the heart that he had and the determination that he had, and the humanity to want to give to others in that moment of personal crisis, to me, is a bar set so high that we can all try to attain that. And he raised millions of dollars. I mean, he created this Cancer Blows event that had, Arturo Sandoval and Lee Loughnane from the band Chicago, and Doc Severinsen and Wayne Bergeron, and all these principal trumpet players, and all these these great trumpet players from all over the place at all these different gatherings, and guys who couldn't get there, who were supporting it from the outside. And it was a beautiful thing. And
I feel in many ways Ryan brought us all close together and realized that we're all part of the same community. It's not some competitive BS that maybe it was 50 years ago or 40 years ago, that we're all in the same community. And, when things go south, we all need to have each other's backs. And that was what Ryan was all about. I'm sorry to go so long, man.
No, perfect.
But I mean, Mark was part of this too. I mean, a big part of it.
You have anything to add to it?
Yeah, well, Brian diagnosed with cancer at the height of his powers, and he didn't give up. And he got this whole thing, Cancer Blows, organized by himself as he's dying for 7 years. And he never stopped, and he just played. He was an inspiration to everybody that he started this. It's almost his greatest legacy. The Cancer Blows, he raised millions of dollars for cancer. He became, very famous in Dallas just by doing this. So, I mean, Ryan is an inspiration to everybody. He's just very few people I've met in my life would measure up to that sort of a human being. So that's about Brian. Great trumpet player, of course, but it was everything else.
Right.
I never met him. As some Pilafin, I never met them, but I can say very honest that they were great and fine musicians who played tuba and trumpet. And of course, Ryan with these Cancer Blows, I mean, he did something great, and he gave an heritage to the world of the trumpet players. And of course, if you just imagine for a second that you are fighting against cancer, and then, of course, I will not be worried about my injury in the third piston. So that's the importance of this. I mean, I can understand pretty well his message, to just not for himself, but he encouraged a lot of people to, hey, go ahead. So when I think all my respect and for him, and rest in peace, because I was following with the social media his situation, his post every day. Even if I never met him, I was, hey, you are just simply amazing, man. So we should be grateful. We are grateful with him for that. Yeah.
No, he was a beautiful human being, and just the fact that he was a part of all our lives, and inspiring is the perfect word, Esteban. I mean, he's inspired so many people. And we'll continue to.
And coming back to the last question of Andy, that's what Jake and Bat did 70 years ago. Inspiration for a lot of people in a different situation, of course, but yeah, that's what they did, and among other great players of their times. But that's what they did.
Great. So like. You know what I mean? I of course I have a million questions, and I know that we're probably not going to get to them. So how about? Do you guys want to ask? Mark and Esteban have never met. Is that correct?
No, we should.
Yeah, of course you should. And I like I said, I'm taking full credit. You guys met, and then Mike, all of us went out for a drink in Macau. We had a great time there. So would you guys? Are you guys curious to ask each other questions?
Well, I want to make one suggestion to Esteban. If you have any problem with this section, tell him that I'm coming in to play in this section for a week. And that will solve all your problems. That was solve.
I will try that.
Yeah, it may solve one problem, but create about 15 others, but that's okay.
Okay, Mark. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to show everyone the kind of brain Mike Sachs has. What was the date of Zarathustra at Juilliard?
March 15th, 1985.
Oh my God.
No, you got to understand. I'm an idiot savant with dates and numbers. I remember dates, I remember phone numbers. I can't remember somebody's name. Like if they told me 5 times in 5 minutes, the 6th minute I wouldn't be able to remember their name. But if you told me their birthday the first time I met them, I'll remember their birthday for the rest of the time. I'll see them. I'll be like February 13th. I mean, it's No, it was that much of a seminal moment for me as a musician.
That's the point. So I want to say I'm kind of honored because before Mike Sachs was Mike Sachs, okay, I knew him I knew him like Mark did, as a phenomenal student. And as far as I know from talking with Mike, for bits and bobs, there were two turning points that I've heard him refer to, and I've been there for both. I was at that Zarathustra, and I believe you got the nickname the Assassin. Okay, so I want Mark to talk about that day, and why that's so important to you, Mike.
Well, I remember it because I'm sitting next to Dave Bilger in the audience at Alice Tully Hall. And the two of them, they were banging heads with each other at Juilliard. It was great. They made each other better.
Right.
So, and I remember, and I hate going to performances at Zarathustra because I get too nervous. Here it comes. I can't stand it. I hate it. Not for me. So I remember after the performance going backstage and seeing Mike, and he's ready to eat a side of beef. He's all pumped up, and he looks at me. He says, "I love this shit." I remember that. He said that. I'm like, oh my God. We got one here. We got a live one here. That's Michael Sachs. That's the essence of Michael. It's never changed.
Yeah. Well, he said to me, that concert is when he finally realized he can really do this.
Oh,
is that right?
Yeah.
And just a shout out, not to interrupt you, but what I remember though, I was at the concert too, and I thought the whole section sounded good. The whole trumpet section sounded good. What? Just name some of the players that were in the section.
Yeah, that section was me, Pete Margulies, who's been a long time in the Utah Symphony. David Mayo was playing third trumpet. He became actually a fighter pilot flying like F-15s, F-16s off of carriers.
Yeah,
and I think I want to say Jim O'Connor, I think, was the fourth player.
Jimmy, oh my God.
It was a real big talent. I don't know what happened to him, but it was a big talent.
Tennis player, right, Mark?
He's an excellent, great tennis player, but he's also a really fine jazz musician.
Yeah. Yes, very
good. Really talented guy.
Oh, yeah.
Fun. Yeah, but that was a great section. But the reason that was a big thing for me was because, I've been studying with Mark, and I've been doing some summer stuff, and it was just like, all of a sudden, about 2 months before, I changed a little. Basically, I'd been playing a 1.5 with a 24 hole and a symphonic Schmidt backbore, and then Gould got me changed to a 1.5, Bach 1.5 with a 23 hole and a 117 backbore, and all of a sudden, it's like some stuff just like clicked in my playing, and something clicked in the way I moved my air and made the sound, and it's like all of a sudden my efficiency ratio went from here to here. And like a lot of stuff clicked, and playing that show and knocking that piece out like that, it's the first moment that I sat on stage after I got done. And the first thought afterwards was like, I think I can do this. I think I got this in me. It's the first time I just thought like, I really think I can do this at the level I want to. And, that's why it really stuck with me.
And Mark, he became the assassin. It was just perfect.
Well, that's him. You listen to him talk. He and Vanya. It's like a marriage made in heaven. Marriage made in heaven. Oh yeah, Wimbledon. Yeah, Michael Sachs. He's just a frustrated jock. He didn't grow tall enough. That's all.
Yeah,
he just wasn't tall enough. That was it. But he's a jock. He's an athlete. He's like one of those high wire athletes. He loves that. He loves the pressure. There was a thing that I saw at the U.S. Open. I was watching the tennis this week, and it says there's something that's printed on the wall. It said, "Pressure is a privilege."
Yeah, that Billie Jean King quote. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's Michael Sachs. I don't know about Esteban, but.
No, well, Mike,
me, I never felt that way, but I understand. I respect.
Mike, do you feel pressure? I'm not being funny.
No, I know this sounds. And I don't mean that to be coy or anything. To me, if I'm prepared,
Yeah.
I don't get nervous. I don't feel pressure. And it's funny, when I first got here, before I started, about 2 weeks before I started, I met David Zauter, longtime second player down the hall, and he played with Bernie Edelstein for 28 years in the section as a second player. He's my age now when I was 26. And we sit on stage, and all we did was play the beginning. We didn't even warm up. We just played the beginning of Chike 4, which is going to be the third week of the season. And it was like we've been playing together for 10 years. It just went bang. And we both kind of looked at each other, and he's like, okay, I've seen, that's all I needed. And then he looked at me and said, I'm only going to give you one piece of advice. He said, the only pressure you're going to feel is the pressure you put on yourself. And I've always thought about that, in that whenever I felt pressure, I felt any anxiety, it's always been self-induced. Either I'm looking at the environment I'm in, or I'm looking at some competitive thing that's BS that doesn't belong there, or I'm introducing an element into the mix that doesn't belong there. And to me, as long as I'm prepared, I can be, being flexible is the name of the game. If you're prepared, you can be flexible, you can be in the moment, you can react, and you're not going to get nervous. I mean, I'll take it a step further. And Esteban, I want to hear Esteban talk about this as well. So we're in Carnegie exactly a year ago, and I'm playing Mahler 5. And I played every Mahler symphony in there except for Mahler 5 at this point. This is the first time I got to finally play Mahler 5 in there.
Carnegie.
And, I played every other Mahler symphony in there at least twice at this point, So most of them, but Mahler 5 eluded me for whatever reason. And I'm sitting out there, and I'm just going through my normal stuff and my normal head stuff, and I'm thinking to myself to stay out of your head, just, don't think you'll only hurt the ball club, stuff like that. And then I started looking around, and I'm like, I'm in effing Carnegie Hall, man, about to play the beginning of Mahler 5, It's like, man, and I thought back to Bud sitting here playing it, and Stevens and Bernie and like 5 other guys that I heard play Mahler 5 in there. And I started kind of gripping a little bit. I started thinking a little too much. And I'm like, just like, wait, stop. No, wrong path. Don't think. And then music, Franz walks out. I'm just doing my normal thing. And then right when it got quiet after, the tuning stopped and Franz walked out and he stood there. And the moment it got quiet, the last thought I had I got real quiet in my mind, and I just thought, dude, just like you've done it thousands of times before. And then I play.
Great.
And it's just like get all that BS out of your mind, and just like I'd done it 1,000 times before, and all of a sudden my whole body language went, whew. And it was just, oh.
Great.
Yeah. So that's, and I'd love to hear Esteban talk about like the voices in your head, like, and how you deal with that.
Yeah, I asked him once. I just want to say, I asked him once. He said you used to get quite nervous, and then you used the word. He said, but these days I'm quite relaxed. I mean, so I want to hear about it too, man. Everyone wants to hear about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes we feel that. I mean, we have that kind of voices coming around us, like saying wrong things all the time. But first thing, I think the same as you, Mike. If you are prepared, everything is fine. You feel confident of yourself. Second thing, of course, just imagine for a second, Mahler 5, Carnegie Hall, first time you are going to play there, the Mahler 5 in Carnegie. And then, because I had that same feeling, not with Mahler 5, but my first time in Carnegie was exactly 1 year ago, November, with Pines of Rome with Muti. So I didn't have that kind of feeling because, of course, it was not Mahler 5, but maybe because Mahler 5 is challenging, it could be different, or not better, but different way of approaching of that moment for me. But I remember to think about that for myself and say, okay, I have 2 ways, 2 paths. One is getting nervous and probably I'm going to screw up everything here. Or the second is just, hey, don't go there. I mean, you don't need to be nervous. You don't need to just play and enjoy the music and be yourself. So obviously, I took the second path, and I think that's what I used to do every day. Because I mean, obviously, I cannot forget where I'm sitting, even if Google, as Mark Gould says, "Hey, go ahead and forget that." I cannot forget it because I'm sitting there, and so but I don't want to say anything about this exactly. But I mean, that makes me feel a little bit pressure sometimes. So and that I cannot forget that. So the question is, how I do to myself is just to be even more confident, even more secure about myself, and even more prepared. So that's why I try to make it simple for myself. Don't think too much. Just play, just be yourself, and then to be natural also. If you make a mistake, why not? I mean, that's human. You can make a mistake. I'm not a robot. I'm not a machine. So, of course, there is moments in your life when you can feel more or less pressure, and probably I can imagine Mahler 5 Carnegie Hall. Hopefully, someday I will do it too. But I will try to have all these experiences around me, all my friends, and all your experiences too for me, to think about them and say, oh, just calm down, and enjoy, and be yourself. Yeah.
I have a question to you guys. It seems to me Mahler 5 is not the hardest Mahler symphony at all.
It is not.
No.
It is not the hardest one. It's just like to do in the opening. Now, I played that once at the Waterloo Music Festival. And I'm playing, and you know, Gerard Schwartz is a conductor. Jerry's conducting. Yeah. So he comes out, you know, I'm ready to start, you know, and they start moving the chairs around in the first violin section. So I said to myself, screw this. And I started. I remember. I started. I said, I don't care. I mean, I'm sitting here panicking. If I wait any longer, you know, I'm going to shit the bed here, you know. And I played it great. It was
wonderful. Clarinetists always complain about Rhapsody in Blue. It's the same thing. They move the piano out. The conductor now feels this is the time they need to talk to the audience for 20 minutes. And then they nod to you, you know, and you've got to do this thing. And then half the time they just take the bow. They don't give you the bow anyway. You know, they take all the credit. So I know exactly what you mean. Great. Well, I want to ask, well, any other questions between the three? Oh, well, Mark, I'm curious about you. You're always playing yourself down like, oh, I hated the pressure of this. But come on, principal trumpet in an opera orchestra is not easy. What do you do with the pressure? I mean, how did you get through it and play well?
I just had to focus on the music the best I could. And if I stayed in the music, I was fine. Anything else that comes in is not fine. Not think too much and just try to stay in the music. But I mean, look, I'm being honest when I said I did not enjoy that kind of pressure. It's not me. It's like I'd rather be involved in creative projects where it's not that. I'm not under the gun. I'm not playing at Wimbledon. I'm not doing, you know, sitting in the Cleveland Orchestra or the Chicago Symphony, having to knock all this stuff out all the time. This would not be a fun life for me. I would not enjoy it. The opera is different because people don't go to hear the orchestra. They go to see what's on the stage. So it's a very different kind of thing. It's a much looser thing. You know, when the stand light comes on, the egos have to go away. I mean, they're not coming to hear you. So it's a very different sort of thing. So I'm being honest about that. But if I would be excited, I'd really get into the performance. You know, some of the Ring performances where the cast were just so fantastic. I'd be carried away in that. It's like, oh, this is fantastic. Isn't this great? And if someone played safe, it would piss me off. You know, I want to hear someone bringing it. Oh, don't give me that safe shit. Come on, man. It's like mythical shit going on the stage. You're going there 1 yen to 2 yen, subdividing some freaking entrance. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that crap. Let's go. And then I become evil and angry, and I'd be better,
Wait, listen, I need to know this because I skipped this question. This is really important. Mike, seriously, what is it about this man that, as I said, as far as I know, as a dumb clarinet player, this is someone that so many of the top trumpet players have gone to polish themselves off or be inspired and everything. What makes him a special teacher? What's so good about Mark Gould as a teacher?
Boy, have you got about 3 hours? It's a complex. I'll try to be brief. That's not easy for me, as you know, but I will be. The best thing about Gould is that Gould is very quick to discern how to bring out the best in somebody, how to address what are their strengths and weaknesses, what do they need to apply here, what do they need to bolster, what do they need to work on. But most of all, some people go from fitting fundamental aspects leading to a desired result in playing the music. Gould is looking, at least with me, the way he worked with me was like, all right, your fundamentals are fine. Keep doing that shit. But we need to work on your expressiveness and your musicality and take your color palette from here to here, your dynamic range from here to here, your expressiveness from here to here. You need to be listening to different people, different styles, different things, incorporating, and saying more, saying something with your playing. And but the thing is that great teachers like Gould don't teach. It's not a one size fits all. You could watch him teach 5 lessons, and I would guarantee you'd see 5 very, very different messages in different lessons. Probably different language and different approaches for the same issues with the different players, because Gould has an innate sense of understanding the psychological basis that somebody's bringing, their intellectual basis that they're bringing to their music making. How good are their ears? Very early on, Gould realized with me that all he had to do was play something, and I can change it and I can adapt and I can play and make something sound more like that, or at least go a little bit that direction. I can hear it. Other people, you have to explain. They can't do it. They're not as audibly adapt. They have to understand that you have to explain it, and you give them an imagery or color, and that's how they get it. So Gould was exceptional at figuring out the key to unlock how to get into somebody's psyche to be able to widen their view of what was possible on the instrument and how to express themselves on the instrument. And ultimately, with that expression, would inherently have to take care of all these other fundamental elements. I mean, he addressed the stuff, at times, but with me, it was much more about expressing. But that's, in a nutshell, the best way for me to describe what separated Gould from, pretty much any other teacher out there, is that he also, for me, I felt like he helped me find my voice. He wasn't interested in me playing with his voice or somebody else's voice. He wanted to help me cultivate my voice. And right. That's a very, very different kind of a thing, but that's the best way I can describe it in a short, kind of compact.
Great. I think you guys might have answered this before, but it's tradition on the show. We end with 2 questions. One is, as guys, and I know Esteban, now you're getting into teaching and stuff like that. Mike's a seasoned teacher, and Mark's the guru, the Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatever. What is it, having taught at top conservatories for years? Some of you are gone around the world teaching math classes. What is the main thing that you latch onto as a rule? In other words, are there things that you're general weaknesses that you're seeing everywhere you go, and things that you like to address? I mean, as a rule, where do you find yourselves going? When you meet a new student, is it usually in the same direction? We'll start with Obi-Wan, Mark at the top.
Yeah. How can I say this? There's a guy, Alex Wilborn. He plays first trumpet in Charlotte. Tremendous trumpet player. I don't know, Michael, if you've ever run into him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wilborn, I remember he studied with me at Juilliard just for one semester, and then he got this job. He would play for me, and it would be magnificent. And I said, boy, that's great. That's terrific. What else do you have? That's wonderful. I don't have anything to say about it. He said, well, what about this interval? Do you think that this interval is out of tune? And I'm thinking, really? Do we have to go there? Why? It has become too data-driven and detail-oriented in a certain way. And it sort of inhibits, I feel that people get too much stuck in the weeds with this. Now, I understand that they have to a point, but I don't know. I don't really know what to do with that in a certain level. But, because it's so much what Michael said, to find your own voice. Don't worry about that quite so much, and you'll sort of come around to how you will solve these sort of problems. I find that that's true, but people play the instruments better than they ever have. As far as technically playing, I mean, it's remarkable in every kind of music. Jazz players, the same thing. I'd say that their harmonic security, how they play their instruments, is better and better and better and better. But it gets to be a point of diminishing returns. Now in orchestras, I think that everybody's overqualified who's in an orchestra. They're overqualified. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me being an old man saying that, but I'm not sure how everybody would react to that.
No, well, I mean, basically, I think you're saying, and as you've been saying before, you'd rather have people find more their own voice and get so wrapped up into the smaller picture.
Yes,
that's what I'm getting from you, Esteban, as the guy who just won the audition, but getting into teaching and all this kind of stuff. And so therefore, you know how it is when someone wins a big job. A lot of people think, "Oh wow, if I take 2 lessons with them, I'll find out the secret, and I'll be the next." Guy. So I'm sure that's where you are right now. So what do you find that you wish would change a little bit in worldwide trumpet playing that you've experienced?
I always find something around everywhere. So that I think it's one of the main things that everybody should take a little time, 5 minutes, to really think about it. When I teach, I just started at Roosevelt University in Chicago. So when I teach to my students, I think in some way, I don't want to pretend to be like, but I think I share the opinion with Mike and Mark. They try to make it simple. I mean, that's the way. Make it simple and find yourself. But I think, technically speaking, every player, every instrument player must find 3 segments. One is the sound, which is your voice. Second is the intonation, and then the rhythm, and all together are just one, and then you make music. So that's the musician, right? When you have all these things. But there is one especially that I'm always taking care about. It is the people, as Mike said before, our trumpet, in our case the trumpet, in your case the clarinet, is the progression of our voice. So I like to tell to my students or everybody around me, please sing more. That's the way to approach every melody you have in your part, is to sing. So in fact, I experiment for myself when I sing my scores, my things. I just feel in the music. I think in the music. I don't think in the technique. I don't think in the intonation. I don't think in the rhythm. I think in the music. Of course, as I mentioned before, I have these 3 things together: sound, intonation, rhythm, always together. But I think that's an important thing to focus in. And I used to receive a lot of messages and things asking, how do you do? Okay, this is the way how I do it. But I don't think it's a formula exactly to this, but this is my way of thinking of this, especially.
Great. Mike, you're now a seasoned teacher. What are you finding?
I just want to echo everything Esteban and Mark have already said. I mean, to me, what I try to look for is somebody who has imagination, somebody who has a concept here of what, first and foremost, the most important thing is your sound. Your sound is your calling card. You're doing an audition. What's the first thing they're going to notice? Your sound. If you don't have a good sound, I don't care how good your technique is or how well you know the music or whatever. You have no sound, you're done. So for me, the first thing is what do you imagine? What's here? What do you hear in your mind of you sounding what is your best sound and making your best sound always, or a sound that's sometimes you need to sound beautiful, sometimes you need to sound angry, and everything in between. So you need to have the imagination to be able to come up with that concept of what is that generating that thing, in the clarinet, the trumpet, the tuba, whatever instrument you happen to be playing. And I feel like a lot of times people are looking at it, instead of the sound first, they're looking at the technique first. And to me, they're actually going one and the same. They feed each other. It's not like I work on fundamentals here and play music over here. They're one and the same. So I think that's a little bit of a misnomer for a lot of people, that they don't see them as this. They see them as kind of disjointed. But always it's got to be the sound has got to reflect the music. It can't be it can't be, it has to be distinct. It can't be separated from the music and something completely disjointed from it. And that's where I see a lot of players, they think, oh, in an audition, I have to play note perfect. And they play in this little box. And then I can't tell you how many guys, come to me afterwards is like, what happened? I didn't advance. I played, I didn't miss any notes. And I don't have the heart to tell them. It's like, you played with, it was about as interesting in this metal mute. I mean, you said nothing. Who wants to hear that? That's why I think with Gould saying it, Esteban, it's like you have to sing, you have to express, you have to say something, you have to be interesting. But interesting can also be in a team manner. You don't want to fly off the handle and go like way, way, way out. You can't really do that. I mean, once in a while, in certain circumstances, like you're playing a Shostakovich 9 third movement trumpet part, or Shostakovich 8 third movement trumpet solo, something where you can like go off on it. And you can go, like my first teacher was this dude Ziggy Elman, big band guy. You channel your like inner Ziggy Elman and like go like off on something. There's stuff where you can do that, where it's appropriate. But again, it's just all about it all comes back to the sound you make, and that comes from the imagination that you have. And to cultivate that imagination, you have to listen to a lot of different resources and a lot of different things across the board, not just your instrument, but other instrumentalists, singers especially.
Great, man. Well, yeah, I just need to say this. John Ye, who's probably, well, I think he said Mark Gould maybe did a least tour with him, John Bruce Ye in Chicago Symphony like 30 or 40 years ago. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, I remember we did that with Joey Silverstein played the violin.
Now
I follow John's daughter on the Food Network.
Yes. Now I have the distinct I have the privilege of saying I invited John to play extra with us, and his daughter was a percussionist, Juilliard.
Yeah.
She played Red Spring, and that was the first time they ever played a concert together, an orchestral concert. So the reason I'm mentioning him is because he's commenting all over the place while I was driving. This is the 20th episode. He's listened to every single second in real time, okay? And holds the distinction for the longest interview at 3 hours, 1 minute, and a few seconds. We're 3 minutes away. So I want to kick his butt. Okay. And I'm going to give you all, 1 to 2 minutes. You might have already answered it. But between COVID, I mean, here we are, we've got seasoned, established professionals. We've got our own problems now, kind of thing. We're teaching, we've got young people who are tuning here. What advice are you going to give them about now? What general advice would you give young people, anyway, musicians, tennis players, whatever they are? And especially in the case of Gould, man, I'd love, this could be life advice, man. Just anything. What do you want to tell people? Or what would you tell the 20-year-old you? Like I asked Vanya. Of course, the difference is, she was like winning tournaments at 20 years old. But that's how I'm going to leave it. So we're gonna start with Obi-Wan Kenobi again. Mark Gould.
I would say expand all the things you know in music. You're going to have to know more than one thing to get going now. You have to become very technically savvy. You have to become very savvy on social media. You have to become very savvy in these things in addition to mastering your instrument. It's a daunting task, much different than even Esteban had to go through. It's a very different sort of thing. It's a very different sort of world. And we got to hang in there and stick together as musicians. This is very, very important. We're coming into some very difficult times, especially for musicians, because we're the canaries in the coal mine. It's going to be very, very tough. And we have to hang together and be very creative and help one another and work with one another. That's all I have to say. Next.
Great. Esteban.
Well, it's been a rough time for everybody, but I will think more about the freelancers. I'm really worried about them. So it's been a hard situation for everybody. Of course, I mean, I'm thinking about how the world is running now. But if I need to give an advice for my 20-year-old Esteban,
yeah. Yes,
I would say probably enjoy more the life around the music, with the music, than other things.
That's what Mark was basically saying before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
Exactly the same.
Okay, Mike, I know I can count on you. You've got like 20 extra seconds to break the record. So just let it rip, baby.
All right. I mean, for people in the COVID time, I mean, it's, the way we went into COVID is point A. The way we're going to come out of it, there's probably going to be B, which is going to be kind of a little bit of an aftermath, but kind of a transition to whatever C is, which is what it's going to be from here on. And the B part's going to be different than when we left it today, and C is most likely going to be different than B and A. So I think it's going to take a lot of musicians being versatile, being willing to look at things in a multidimensional way. I think it's going to be very important. I mean, Mark, touched on this a little bit. I mean, social media savvy, tech savvy, as a trumpet player, being able to play as many different styles, knowing Baroque trumpet, anything you can do to market yourself or find a niche or find some creative path. And, just stay creative, stay curious, and stay engaged. And I agree with Mark, support each other, because, as Esteban said, I really worry about not so much us, but the guys who are the freelancers, the guys that, are going, that maybe have a plethora of stuff normally that all of a sudden they've got nothing and there's no safety net. I mean, those are the guys I worry about, or that somehow things will contract a little bit, which is altogether possible. But I also like to look at the COVID time as a time of opportunity. And it's a time of opportunity of invention, reinvention, rebranding, rethinking, and exploration. if people, I think, are creative and smart about it, you can actually find opportunity during this moment to recalibrate or take yourself in an even better direction, further or evolve yourself. So, there's a lot of opportunity with that. And then, I'm sorry, what was the other part you wanted to get?
What would you tell yourself at 20? Or
myself at 20.
Yeah.
What would I tell myself at 20? Same as Esteban. I was just like, if I could look at myself at 20, just take a deep breath. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the journey. It's going to be okay. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. I put enormous pressures on myself. Some of it a little bit external, but most of it was internally, precipitated. And it's I would tell my 20-year-old self, just lighten up. It's going to be fine. Just stay the course. I mean, Gould used to say this to me, and I know he, was very him, and just like, sometimes I get so down, I'd be really depressed, and I look at him in a lesson, my first year especially, I'd be like, look, man, if I can't do this, just tell me now, and I'll go back to LA, and I'll go to law school or get a MBA somewhere. Screw it. And he would just kind of laugh. He'd be like, "You'll be fine, man. You'll be fine." And he'd look at me and be like, "You get your chance. You get your chance." And just every time he said that, it was just like, all right, I just need to just take a step back. But if I could just tell myself that and get myself to do that, I would have maybe enjoyed a few years when I was very stressed. But that's part of the journey of growing and understanding what you need to do in order to succeed. So, would I even be the same person if I hadn't experienced that?
This is the perfect place to end. But there's one thing that I've wanted to know, and it's in the terrible order. I'll probably get a lukewarm answer, but this goes back to the other turning point of Mike Sachs. When we did this famous l'histoire that has now put us together here 30 plus years later, okay, I was like, okay, Mark Gould's conducting this and Mike Sachs is next to me, and who am I to sit next to him? And all of a sudden I had this great schadenfreude because the conductor kept on torturing the trumpeter next to me, okay. And now what was that all about? Okay, and Mike, what did that do for you? And I want to hear your point of view.
Yeah. So what happened was, just to bring Esteban and everybody into this. So we're doing l'histoire, and it's my third year at Juilliard, and Gould's conducting, and there's one rehearsal where everything I played, Gould would stop and be like, "The fuck are you doing? What are you doing, man? It's like, it's too long, it's too loud, it's too this, it's too that, it's not this, it's not the right style, it's just everything." And this went on for about, 20 minutes. And I'm getting pissed, and I'm getting more and more pissed. And the more pissed I am, the more he's doing it. And then finally, he pushed me over the edge with something, and I put my hand out, and I looked at him, and I'm like, "God damn it, get off my fucking ass." And there's this wry smile. I was like, "Okay, all right." and then he looks at me and says, "I was wondering how long it would take you to push back. I wanted to see how much you would take. You wanted to test me and see how much I would take and how I would react. And you liked when I finally had enough and pushed back on you."
Oh, for sure. I like that. But also, I was right. You were playing like shit. No,
maybe it was the conductor. You ever think of that asshole?
Don't blame the clarinetist.
No. It wasn't the clarinet. Sounded great. It was the goddamn guy waving his arms, getting in the way, man.
Yeah, probably, but I didn't make any sound, so I'm fine.
Yeah, still. I mean, just, you're emoting, man. Giving you that bullshit. It's like,
exactly.
You know what? Because we've had such a good time and it's taken so long, I'm going to do something that I should be doing. Lorenzo, come on. But I've never. He's been like, how'd you like the poster that he did? He's done the posters. He does the techie. He's one of the really great bass clarinetists. He's running everything from behind. So we want to know what are you advising people? what are you advising young people how to do in this time, and just generally, as someone who he's played 5 major orchestras, 8 full-time jobs. He's only 35. What advice are you giving to people?
Well, in this time, I just tell them to change jobs.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Great. Thank you for giving hope.
No. Joke apart. I just tell them what my first teacher told me. It's gonna be difficult, but there's always gonna be a place for a clarinet player to play in an orchestra or somewhere else. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough, but it was tough also before. For the job in the LSO, there were hundreds of people for the audition. For my job in Madrid, there were hundreds and hundreds of people for just one place. So it's always been difficult. I mean, of course, now it's going to be more difficult. But I think, look, if you play well, if you play as they said, I mean, I cannot agree more than with all these amazing people. Just sing, just try to make music. Who cares about, going to the concert and everything is beautiful and safe? I never liked that. And you know me, Andy. Just do it and do it as crazy as you can and let people love it. And this is my advice. There will always be one place available, I think. I hope. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye. It's been a great night.
Very good. Okay, so listen, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. I cannot tell you how much fun this was and educational. And this whole idea I thought Vanya was superb. I've had the privilege of playing with all 3 of you. I've learned so much from every one of you. I've seen all the interviews. I've learned so much from all of you. I've hung with you guys. I've had so much fun with all of you. I thank you. These were really great words of wisdom, I think, for a lot of people, all kinds of musicians, sports fans that tuned in today. And I hope you had just as good a time as I did. And you've now broken the record for interview series. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Andy.
Hey, thank you, Andy. Thanks, Mark and Esteban.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Great to see you guys.
See you next week.
All right.